All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Truth Warrior. So happy to be with you today. It is Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. And today I wanted to cover part two of the occult history of totalitarianism. I feel like this is the timing to bring this out. For those of you who've been following my work for a while, I have been covering this subject, various elements of it, for quite some time on my Truth Warrior page on Substack. That is the best place to go and support this channel and this work. And I have a huge library there for you to look over of all the research that I've been doing on this subject and many others, and many of the other subjects that dovetail with what we're going to get into today. I also hope you went back and hopefully caught up on part one. Although, just to say, it's not absolutely mandatory. It's going to help fill in the bigger subject for you. If you go back and check out that part one, you can find it on all my channels. It's publicly available. We went close to 3.5 hours. We might go about the same on this one. I've realized that I could do 12 parts of this and we still wouldn't reach the bottom of it. But I think we can do enough. We don't need to dedicate our entire lives to understand some of the points here. We can just spend a few hours. We can go through with a fine tooth comb. We can look at the research that's already been done for all of us. That's what my job is to collect that work that's already been done at a very high level with receipts. That's the work I select, is what work, what opinions, what positions, what theories, what coverage of historical events has receipts with it, has good arguments. That's the other thing I'm looking for, is good logical arguments. Who makes the best argument? That's who's going to get my attention. I'll have even more attention paid to anything that also has receipts to go along with it. And even though we might not be able to make a final declarative theory or statement here at the end of it, you're going to get enough in this show today. And if you definitely check out that part one, to hopefully activate your own curiosity to go and look into these matters for yourself. Because there's nothing like that. There's nothing like actually going and doing real investigative research. It's very rewarding. I thoroughly enjoy it. It puts you at a whole other level of this game of information warfare. It arms you against lies and propaganda, and it helps to make the absolute insanity and chaos that's not making any sense. It just helps to make it at least a little more sense. It makes a little more sense. And that's all we can hope for. So I'm being very generous here with playing it down. I think it's even bigger than this. From what I'm going to give you guys today, if you thought part one was lit, just sit tight, relax, and enjoy. We've got so much to do. I've done all the work. I've got it all collated and put together. I did all the slides. We got reading. I'm going to read for you guys, place a couple videos, add some commentary, hopefully have a few laughs along the way. We'll keep it light. But we are definitely going to be going deep, and no doubt there's going to be some controversial elements to this. But like I said in the first one, such is the nature of investigating the facts of reality. And we all just have to put our feelings and opinions aside for a moment to try to open our minds to other possibilities. And then in the end, you make the decision, you make the call. I'm just here to present the research that's available that many of you out there may just not be aware of. I wasn't aware of it, and that's why I get excited and passionate to share it, because I felt that excitement when I discovered some of this research and information. And then it really helped clarify things for me that were confusing me. That's what this research is. It's my questioning and the questions that I keep having. And the more you dig into it, you can actually get some answers. Surprise, surprise. Or you can at least get closer to the answers, if you want to put it there. But I hope you guys get a lot out of this. So welcome. Anybody that's new to my channel, welcome. Thank you. Glad you're here. You're going to hear some things you might not have heard before, and you might be tested on different levels in terms of, what you can handle all at once. I definitely do a smorgasbord of presentation and research on these shows. So it's going to be a lot flying at you. So feel free to pause it, come back to it, revisit it. If you can pick out anything out of this, though, I'll try to add as much like conceptual knowledge too, to get that big perspective, just to help you think it through and maybe better understand it. And it's also something that helps my understanding, is to not just get so stuck in the weeds all the time, but like zooming out, try to understand the concepts and the bigger picture. It's so healthy for your mind to look at it from that perspective. And so that's all I'm trying to do. So I hope that happens for you during the show today. And feel free to say hello in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from in the world. I'm always curious. And I also want to set this off with a thank you. I kind of was blown away by the amount of people that shared out part 1. I guess I was right about the timing. And I got so many great, encouraging thank yous and messages from people. I definitely got my share of trolling and whatnot, but that's okay. I don't mind that either. Everybody's got their opinion. Just, try your best to be respectful about it. But I just want to say thank you to everybody that also sent me some further data that I was not aware of. You guys always send me great stuff. So thank you for that. Keep doing it. And, working together, we can get this information out far and wide and combat the algorithms, the mainstream media propaganda, the fake news, the fake history, and we can hopefully find some truth, which is the goal. So, occult history of totalitarianism. Just a quick summary of part 1. There's a hidden element to history. There's a hidden element to this world. There's an occult. That's what we mean by occult. It's hidden. It's not, it's available to be known. It's not like we're talking about things that are not known and we're just trying to penetrate the great mysteries of reality and the universe and time and space and consciousness and the nature of reality. Hey, that's all great. Okay. I love that stuff too. With this subject, we're talking about human behavior. We're talking about human psychology. And that's documented. That's experiential. That's facts of reality that we're talking about. I try to think of it like this. I was thinking about how can I open this up in that big concept way. So I'm going to take a crack at it. I was thinking over breakfast. I probably did it better over my breakfast table, but I'll try to not mash it up here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I did have some questions where I feel like people maybe misunderstood some of the perspective I was coming at, because they maybe are thinking I'm coming at, getting into the weeds when really I'm trying to point at something bigger. My take these days is not so much about pointing at those people that are doing all the evil, bad, corrupt, tyrannical things. It's not ever really been about that. There's definitely a lot of that. We want to find out if there's criminality happening, if there's corruption happening, if there's totalitarianism rising up in your society, if there's evil running amok in your world. There's an origin to it. There's an origin to it. There are factors that come into play that produce those effects. Think of those things that I just mentioned: evil, totalitarianism, criminality, all these things that we're all witnessing to our horror happening all around us more and more. There's a history to that. And that's an occult history. And it wasn't just covered up by the high table and the powers that be. It's also covered up by us because we don't want to look at it as human beings. And I don't like using that word "we" very much, because I see you all as, and myself as, a beautiful individual. But I think you know what I'm trying to get at here is that as an individual, you possess reason and you possess the ability to see patterns. Now, sometimes we see patterns we want to see, and then we think that equals truth and fact. Sadly, that can also be wrong. But sometimes when you follow patterns and you're meticulous about it and you work like a detective about it and you keep an open mind, but you look for where do the facts line up the most. And sometimes to find out where the facts line up the most, you got to eliminate what the facts aren't lining up with. So you got to eliminate what's not true in order to find out what is true. And that's the best way to investigate all of these things we're going to get into, all these mysteries, especially something like the occult roots of totalitarianism. I mean, who ever even heard of such a thing? Many people have not. They look at the political history as being, oh, it was the left, it was the right, and then it was this guy, and then that guy, and then it was the Rothschilds, and then it was the Orsini family, and then it was the Epstein client, and it was all the, and we go them. And you go, yeah, yeah, there's definitely some things we can look at. But what really frightens me the most is not the fact that, say, for example, in Canada, that we have a very corrupt and inept government at the helm. That's horrifying. What's horrifying is the amount of Canadians that are clapping and cheering for it and supporting it and spreading the propaganda that was carefully crafted for them to digest in their algorithmic social media feeds and then repeat and believe in. And there's a sort of weaponization of your emotions that is taking place to draw you into certain ways of seeing yourself in the world and to distract from the facts, distract from the real criminals, to camouflage them and to actually make them look like the good guys, whereas the people that are fighting against that and trying to expose it are deemed the bad guys. And that's why we need to study the occult roots of totalitarianism. Is it's not just that we're dealing with a bunch of psychopathic, narcissistic, megalomaniacal, evil people that want power and nothing but power at the expense of everybody else. That's not the end of the equation. The end of the equation is, yeah, and we voted in and we cheered on and we support it because if you're not individuated and you can't think for yourself, you need someone to give you a prescription for life and a prescription for thought and a prescription for behavior, and then policing your speech and then policing every action you ever take in your life for the rest of your days. And it just never ends. And then we lose freedom, and then we lose truth, and then we lose success and prosperity and hope and all the beautiful qualities of the human spirit. They get outweighed by the negative qualities of the human spirit. So what this points out to this battle of good and evil we're seeing on the geopolitical level or the social level or the political, whatever it is, you're actually experiencing that as an individual inside your own consciousness right now. Maybe you felt it. The war within has leaked out into the world, and you're going to see it also happening on the world stage. So in a really funny way, by looking at the occult roots of something, the hidden roots, the less obvious roots of something, you can get a lot of perspective on what's happening around you in your society. But I hope you're also understanding that you're getting a lot of insight as to what is happening within you, because we're dealing with human consciousness. So if we think about it like, all right, we got totalitarianism. Everybody has their theory and argument for who started, what's the worst form, where does it typically land on the political spectrum, which side of it expresses a more evil version of totalitarian, all these types of things. You can get caught up in that. And that's where most scholars and academics and people commenting on the space, that's where they stay. They don't move away from that to that, I feel like, a much wider perspective, which is also bringing in the element that an individual might be doing to ensure his enslavement, to assist it into coming into being. And the reason that is the root, and I got this in part one, the occult root of totalitarianism boils down to the state of your psyche as an individual. And that means we can look at history now with a much wider lens, with more context, needed context, to understand both the tyrants and the cult leaders, but also the people who worship and follow them. That we need, there's a relationship between those two forces. It's not just one, it's not just the other. The evils of the world, the evils of history, as we shall see, start with individual minds that then gain influence in Masonic temples, in churches, in mosques, in synagogues, in universities, in science departments, in high schools, in your local mayor office, your post office, right down to you and me. Everywhere we go with our traumatized psyches, us humans, there we are. Knowing that law, your work is now far easier to collect the facts. And your pattern recognition is going to be massively upgraded, because you're not just looking for the latest, coolest conspiracy theory or accusation levied against the high tables. You already know that exists. You're trying to find out now the next level, the occult level, which is, yeah, but like we keep these people propped up because they're few, we're many. So it's a simple calculation that why are the many constantly over thousands of years now right up to this very nanosecond, playing pretend. Oh, we're all victims of the royals and the elites. We're the victims. Okay, yeah, there's people out there trying to plunder you and corrupt you and lie to you. But like you have the free will to accept that lie or do the work that it takes to realize it's a lie and then not believe it and then pull your support away from those entities. So this is an empowering process. So to shrink it all down, let's think of it. So I was telling you about this, like, how do we get the bigger picture? You've got human consciousness at war with itself, right? You got left and right politics, but you also have a left and right hemisphere of your brain. So it kind of like proves the point of this as within, so without a phenomena that we're all witnessing. You have different experiments of political totalitarianism run in multiple countries in the world, multiple different cultures that drastically differentiate from each other, different religious sects, different cults and groups, different secret societies, fraternities, and sororities, different elite royal tables, and also working man. What would it be? It would be like the local workhouses, the labor unions, right down to the druggies on the streets, right? Like we always look at evil as only coming from the top down. This is a flaw. Who taught you that? Who taught you that? Who taught you that evil only exists in people that have money and power? I'm not saying it doesn't. Absolutely. But is that the only thing that motivates human evil? Is just how much money you got in your bank account? Right? Well, history shows us it's actually not that. There have been many very evil, wealthy, powerful people, no doubt, definitely. And we could understand, yeah, greed and they want more and it's never enough and they're psychopaths and they just love their power and they want power over other human beings. They didn't figure out the real Rubik's Cube, which is about, oh, right, personal power. Right, personal power. And I don't need to have slaves under me then. I don't need to have a totalitarian colony because I have my own personal power. I don't need to siphon and feed off of everybody else's loosh. I got my own. Okay, the tyrants never figured that. So we know this is obviously that. There's many examples of that, but we never talk about the tyranny coming from the bottom up. And this is where we don't want to go as individuals, because it actually kind of blows a hole in our worldview, because it blows a hole in the victim narrative. So when we realize that this evil we're talking about, I'm just going to use that word to just encapsulate all the isms, all the totalitarian, all the slavery, all the murder and all the things, okay? There's a lot more to what produces that than meets the eye. And you won't see it unless you get out of your own way and unless you reject victim consciousness and victim premise. It's the premise of your argument. I'm saying the premise of your argument might be flawed. I learned that from some of the best philosophers who thought about this stuff as well. I'm not the one that invented any of this. I'm just here to tell you what I've learned from the greats. And they would tell you, yep, victim consciousness, that's where it all went wrong. That's what breeds the worst of the totalitarianisms. And what do we see in the world but the victim Olympics happening? It's been happening for at least a decade or more, and it's never actually changed if you really look at history objectively and you're honest with yourself. And it's just as prevalent on the left as it is the right today, as we can all see. Everybody's just choosing their pariahs and their favorite victim narratives. And yet real freedom is elusive in the mix of it. So on the Unslaved podcast, my colleague Michael Tessarian, who's been doing this for way longer than I've been around, came to the conclusion years ago, it's what actually kicked off his public work. And it's why he's so unique. It's why I reference him constantly, because nobody listens to this side of the argument. And he's one of the best at it. He's one of the only ones in our alternative research movement that's bringing it up. There's literally nobody else. which is that it's not just about what the masters on the hill are doing, it's what the slaves are doing to empower those masters. And what if we all found out that the real conspiracy is that humans, when left to just their their basic settings, not just the basic settings, because your natural settings, the greats will tell you, is freedom. Okay. So if there's a basic setting that you come into and you're just plagued by the fears of the world, and then you have all these voices of lies and propaganda amplifying that fear and pulling the rug from under your feet to keep you in that anxiety state, you start to have to ask the question, well, what if we want freedom from freedom when we're in that state? And what if that is what empowers the totalitarianism? And yet we always go back to looking at the history of all these horrors that we're going to cover a little bit here, and we've covered it before, and go, oh, well, it's Mussolini to blame. It's Stalin. It's these people over here. It's that group over there. But we can't allow ourselves to stay there, because you're missing the bigger picture of the origins of totalitarianism and the origins of evil, really, and that this is a potential for every human being. That was the point of part one. So when you have that as the big premise, and then you now go through the facts of all these different examples, of which there's just too many to cover. That's the thing. If you had maybe one off here and there of totalitarianism, you could go, yeah, I don't know, Dave. I think it's just kind of it's an anomaly that kicks off every once in a while. It's not an anomaly. You know what's an anomaly? Freedom is an anomaly. Objective thinking and reason is an anomaly. Truth is an anomaly in the human condition. Now you're going to look, oh, what? Truth is an anomaly? Yes, that's why all the cult leaders had adherents lined up around the block, as did the totalitarians, as did the rulers, did the medieval lords and papal families and royal families. So we can definitely study them, but you got to study this element alongside it. Okay. So just want to make that point clear to open up. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes here. Let's get into the real stuff. Let me pull up this quote. I did a presentation. It's a two-part. It's a premium presentation on Truth Warrior Substack, and you can look it up. It's called The Occult Conspiracy, and it was based off of this book by Michael Howard, who wrote a phenomenal book on what we're talking about today. It's essential in your library if you want to understand this. This is actually from the opening preamble of the book, okay? He says this: though largely ignored by Orthodox historians, the Freemasons, Knight Templar, and Rosicrucians affected the course of the French and American revolutions, as well as the overthrow of the medieval feudal order. Inevitably, the true ideals and esoteric practices of these societies have, at times, been perverted by self-serving individuals. Notice he used that phrase, and we'll get to that in a second. British security forces, the founding fathers of America, and the Vatican have all justified their actions, for good or for ill, by claiming the mystic ideals of secret societies. So that's just sort of a summary of the book. That's what he's addressing in the book. Is it true? What's true about it? And what I liked about Michael Howard's book was that he had that ability to give you some nuance to show you it wasn't all evil either. We're dealing with human beings, right? Remember that big premise: human beings with traumatized psyches, and also human beings with genius psyches that are humanitarian and want to use ancient knowledge or wisdom, or understanding the building blocks of how to build a civilization, how to build a healthy mind. This is what was bequeathed to all humanity from our ancestors. But that treasure trove of thousands and thousands of years of wisdom, accrued wisdom, collected works of wisdom of past humanity, who experienced different phases of time on Earth, different phases of the building and destruction of civilizations. They've got a lot to teach us living here in 2025. The problem is, a lot of that information is classified. It's misinterpreted. It's been appropriated and then repackaged by various priesthoods, by various secret society groups, by elites, by educators, schoolmasters, university professors, by human beings that when they touch truth, knowledge, wisdom, right, the real magic, it can have a paralyzing effect, especially if the hand that touches that ancient knowledge and wisdom, which is not itself a good thing or an evil thing. It's simply knowledge. Like the way math is not good or evil. It's just a way of measuring reality. In the wrong hands, in the hands of a traumatized psyche that didn't do the inner work to untraumatize and to deal and face and get out of victim consciousness and understand that you are empowered from within and you do not require a whole ant colony of slaves at your feet. That kind of warped mind gets their hands on ancient wisdom and knowledge. And what do they do with it? What does an untamed mind do with high wisdom from servants of truth? Well, they warp and distort it because the truth is too blinding, and there's almost like a paralyzing effect that can take place because that person's not ready for that. They're not even orientated psychologically to those truths. So they look at it and they interpret the symbolism, they interpret the myths, they interpret the legends, they interpret the lore, they interpret the information from that body of ancient occult knowledge that's been lost to humanity through time and then repackaged and redelivered to us in all these distorted, garbled forms. They take that and they can't give you the full version of it. They can't give you the full because their minds are already editing out the point of those truths. And so they have to repackage it in a way that suits their distorted worldview. So now we've got editing going on as the information is being delivered from these old universal immortal truths. So when Michael Howard is pointing out something here, let's go through this again. There's a few points. So he's saying, though largely ignored by Orthodox historians, yeah, that's an understatement. The Orthodox historians don't want to go anywhere near this. And I wonder why. He's bringing up specific groups, the Freemasons, Knights Templar, Rosicrucians. I could add, he's talking in Western history and Western civilization, because that was his point with the book. I could add the whole Eastern wing of all these groups. Did you know they existed? You know, every culture and group on the earth has a version of these. We can all argue about who's more powerful than who, but just got to say that. He's saying these secret occult groups got their hands on this knowledge, some of them for good, some of them for ill. It wasn't all bad. It wasn't all good. And they're at the base of the French and American revolutions, which are crucial to the history of Western civilization. Right? So you find out at the root of our civilization is both good and evil. Are we surprised? So your enemies are going to move in and go, well, look at all the evil. Oh, you're just look at all the evil. Meanwhile, they'll never tell you about their evil. And then you go, yeah, what about the good? I mean, you are here in this amazing civilization that is giving you the freedom to say whatever the hell you want without going to jail. Well, unless you live in the UK. Right? It's getting worse and worse. But like, if we think of the basic premise that Western civilization started with, which was, hey, and you can track the philosophical history of these ideas, by the way. They didn't just emerge with the Magna Carta or the Constitution. There's a whole lineage of debate that went on for hundreds of years about this before we hacked out the best balance we could at the time for how can we have civilization? How can we move things forward? How can we get people productive? How can we build something beautiful that will last forever and maintain human freedom? Well, we need to reorientate the way we look at the world. We need to understand that there's this thing called the individual that we need to build it around. So it's about where are we going to support individual aspirations and goals and thereby create a whole system that produces genius minds that can solve problems for humanity in a variety of categories? Or are we going to go stick with the old tribal collectivism, which I mean, objectively, doesn't move the needle an inch when it comes to moving humanity towards a far more spectral way of looking at consciousness and time and civilization and law and human consciousness, human beings and freedom and slavery and all that, right? So I'm trying to tell you, it's a bit of a tangled knot to go through. And you shouldn't be going through this history with a purely negative worldview of the people involved in building our civilization, simply because you found some corrupt agents, right? That's jump to conclusions, Matt. Simultaneously, you can't take the position of all the modern day historians and academics who are like, it was all just ponies and rainbows, bud. Or you'll get the crazy ones that are anti-West and anti-American, anti-freedom completely. They want to blow the whole thing up. They're into like more of a Rousseauan, Marxist type worldview or fascist worldview or whatever it is. Collectivism, right? Which is the base of all of them. And they're going to say, no, every single thing was evil. So you're getting two extremes all the time. You're never getting the real package, the full story. And that's why I recommend people like Michael Howard, because he's going to give you both sides of it. Okay? Overthrow the medieval feudal order. We're just going to touch on that briefly. Feudalism, which is they're trying to resurrect a neo-feudalism in our modern era. Because these old knightly orders didn't go anywhere. The royals didn't go anywhere. They just changed, but the philosophy never changed. The goal for power never changed. And then what's he saying? Inevitably, the true ideals and esoteric practices of these societies have at times been perverted by self-serving individuals. So he's saying what I'm saying is that what's known in the occult world, in the occult traditions, which is simply just the hidden, lost knowledge that goes well back to Egypt, Samaria, Ireland, Atlantis, right? And before. That got shattered, that got divided, that got torn up like the way a bunch of hyenas come and pick at the carcass that the lion left over. The lion came in, did his job, took off, and then the little hyenas come in for the scraps. And then they sell the scraps to the other hyenas, pretending that's the real thing. And that's what happened in a nutshell. The Nazis, the Bolsheviks, British security forces, the founding fathers of America, the Vatican have all justified their actions for good or ill. So we've got some room there to go, wow, we've got some good, we got some ill, okay? And they all did it by claiming the mystic ideals of secret societies. And you can see it in their writings, you can see it in their actions, you can see it in the architecture alone. Just spend a whole lifetime studying the architecture of the West and the world, and you're going to start finding the Masonic measurements, you're going to find the numerology, you're going to find the alignments, you're going to find the whole thing. It's the same way you're going to look in the megalithic cyclopean ruins of the ancient world that align with certain constellations and were used for certain ceremonial, energetic purposes, right? You're going to see that trend, that tradition continuing. You're going to see the Egyptian symbols all over the Vatican in Rome, as well as the Mithraic symbolism and the, all kinds of other traditions, the Druidic symbolism. And you're going to see these because they're all plundering. You're going to see it in Islam, in the symbolism, in the rhetoric. You're going to see it in Judaism. It's everywhere. You're going to see it in Buddhism. You're going to see it in atheism even. You're going to see elements and pieces, little pieces of the once whole archive of lost knowledge. And that's what these orders were done and set up to guard. And yes, when you take ancient magical occult traditions and start applying pieces of them into the political world, what do you get? Do you get all the writings of these Illuminati guys that are like, oh, we just wanted peace and brotherhood, guy. Like, what are you so mad at us about? I'm like, yeah, but your consciousness is distorted. You're looking at the premise wrong. You're a collectivist. You reject the world. You reject your body. You live in a Gnostic paradigm. And so you're going to reshape the world based on the ancient lost archive of knowledge of collective humanity? Or are you going to rebuild the world in your image, after your likeness, after your traumatized psyche? And the reason you want to drive for power as a way of doing it and violent revolution as a way of achieving it is because you don't have personal empowerment. So you lost the point of all that ancient mystical knowledge, didn't you? That's what I would say to these Illuminati dinks. Because look at the world they made. Look at it. Look what happened to it. And then even the good in those groups and even the good people in these organizations and societies that know what I'm talking about, they soon found themselves to be the minority in their lodges and in their groupings. And they went, holy crap. And then they realized to their horror, oh, humanity doesn't even share our vision of like a truly free world built on reason and prosperity and all these things. They don't even want that. They want freedom from freedom. How are we going to upgrade human consciousness here? And then some resent-filled, envy-filled person sits at the table and goes, I got an idea. Let's do re-education camps and just force everybody. You know what? We do need the strong arm. We do need to go at it feudal style. Let's create a bunch of different brands of it and then do some experiments and see which one wins out. And then whichever one wins out will be the model we use for the new order of the world that we've been dreaming about for hundreds of years. And so they go, oh, great idea there, Nigel. Let's do it. Let's do the experiments. You take America, you take Italy, you take Germany, you take Russia, you take, and then let's do the experiments, run them side by side and see which one's the strongest. And then they found out after gathering all the data, they went, oh, well, those Nazis had some good elements over here that got them power within 6 years. Like that was pretty remarkable. The commies, man, the Russia, man, well, they still had some success. You know what they did I can imagine the table. He's like, you know what they did in Russia that was successful is they got the university students and the lower and working classes all up in arms in the revolutionary fire, and they fought the war for us. Those dummies, they went in there and fought and destroyed their own empire and destroyed their own country for it. We didn't even have to fire a shot. They did it to themselves. So let's use that model of weaponizing the minds of the young, impressionable, naive little baby deers is the way to overthrow the society without having to invade it with an armed force that costs too much goddamn money. We're still paying back all the debt for all these other wars. Let's find another way. And then another guy goes, you know what? We got our boy in there, FDR over there, USA. We got him on our strings. And guess what? He was able to get the Americans into it. Even though their entire constitution was completely built around the opposite of it, look what we were able to pull off in America. Not quite all the way. We didn't get to go full, Khmer Rouge on them yet, but we got there. We're slowly able to soften them over time, right? I'm just giving you a sketch here of just how I see it. And then they all go, so they all have strengths and weaknesses. And then over time, it's updating and upgrading and more experiments. And then they do all the psychological research on the human race. And then they bring that back to the table, and then more discussions are had. And then and then history and the French Revolution and blah, blah. And here we go. Here we are. Where we are today. So this is why it's all relevant. All these seemingly unrelated subjects of history that might be dry and boring of themselves until you realize just how relevant they are to what's happening right now, and will help inform you and help you understand and answer the question around this for yourself. And yeah. And so I just thought that was a good opener. And then if we move on here, I went back to this book. It's a book I've brought up many times. I brought this up in some of these other presentations I'm talking about, but I found some new goodies in there, kept reading it. This is a book called Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All the Religions and Governments of Europe, carried on in the secret meetings of Freemasons, Illuminati, and reading societies collected from good authorities by John Robertson, professor of natural philosophy and secretary to the Royal Societies of Edinburgh. And it was written in 1797. 1797. Okay. So this discussion, this debate that we've all been having, that people are finding out about today, that think only applies since maybe post 2020 or maybe post 2016 or post 9/11, wherever you want to trace it all back. It did not start there. What we started seeing in this new millennium was simply the carrying out of the plans. All the preceding stages were just like the buildup. We're in the build out phase, right? But yeah, just a quick, even just from a Wikipedia, John Robertson was a Scottish physicist and mathematician. He was a professor of natural philosophy at University of Edinburgh, a member of the Edinburgh Philosophical Society. When it received its royal warrant, he was appointed as the first general secretary to the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Robinson invented the siren and also worked with James Watt on an early steam car. So he's an inventor, right? But man, he wrote an entire book on a massive conspiracy. And here's some of the sections of that book I wanted to highlight for you. So let's go through it. In the beginning of 1783, 4 professors of the Marian Academy, founded by the widow of late Elector viz. Ulschneider, Cosendry, Renner, and Grunberger, with 2 others. And by the way, he's continuing on. He already broke down their stories, so I'm kind of picking up halfway through here. You can go read the book if you'd like. With 2 others, he says, were summoned before the court of inquiry and questioned on their allegiance respecting the order of the Illuminati. You know, the one that's supposed to never exist, but here's the actual historical evidence or part of it that actually they did. They acknowledge, he says, that they belong to it, and when more closely examined, they related several circumstances of its constitution and principles. So he's saying we basically got to do an inquiry on these guys. They were members of this order, and here's what they said. Their declarations were immediately published and were very unfavorable, he said. They were unfavorable. The order was said to abjure Christianity and to refuse admission into the higher degrees to all who adhered to any of the 3 confessions. Now, I got some reasons why that may have happened, other than anything that you might be thinking, but that's another show. Needless to say, this group wanted to wipe out all religions, okay, and replace it with the religion of the state. Sensual pleasures were restored to the rank they held in the Epicurean philosophy. Look at this. Self-murder was justified on Stoical principles. Now, he's not talking about suicide there, guys. He's talking about the murder of consciousness. And I got nothing wrong with Stoicism on many regards, but when you warp Stoical principles, you can use them as a justification for self-murder. That's what he's talking about. In the lodges, death was declared an eternal sleep. So there's no afterlife. There's no reincarnation. This is actually part of the ancient mysteries. Patriotism and loyalty were called narrow-minded prejudices. This is what your radical left is telling you today, and incompatible with universal benevolence. Continual declamations were made on liberty and equality as the unalienable rights of man. And we have to ask the question, what version of liberty and what version of equality were these guys talking about? They use the words that you might recognize, but do they mean the same things when they use them? Got to think about that. The baneful influence of accumulated property, here we go, was declared an insurmountable obstacle to the happiness of any nation whose chief laws were framed for its protection and increase. Guys, we're talking about the 1700s. When did Marx write the Communist Manifesto again? About property? I'm here to make the argument that Marx was not the author of the premise of communism. The occults were. The occultists were. Well, here they are in the 1700s, the Bavarian Illuminati, talking about the same exact thing. Elimination of private property. Right there, we could open up this book getting into philosophy, who needs it? We could open up many books from thinkers that brought the counter arguments to the elimination of private property. You know what their premise was as philosophers? Well, your body is private property. Who does it belong to? Does it belong to you and your belief in the creator, or not even nature? Like, your body is your property, your vehicle to command. You are commanding it every day. It's not the government that's commanding your body, it's you. It's not the crowd that's commanding your body, it's you. Now, you can make a choice to give the control of your body and your mind over to those entities, but you can also make the choice to not do that. Hence all the people that were put in solitary confinement and burned at the stake and boiled in oil and flayed alive and torn apart by wild horses in front of raving masses, as examples of what you do in human society to people that think for themselves and believe that their body is their property and not the property of the herd and the crowd, right? So private property is the first right that births all the others. It's the territorial imperative of every living mammal, every living creature on the planet needs to carve out some territory, needs to make it its own, and then needs to viciously defend it so that it can raise young and continue the propagation of its species, and then to hunt and thrive and survive. You need property, you need a domicile, you need an area to carve out as yours, and you need to defend it against all attackers. Now, the problem before, like pre-civilization, is you could go ahead and do that, but there was no way of securing that against the other tribes or maybe your own, right? So you always lived in tyranny. You always lived in totalitarianism, the human being did, until we got a couple shards that popped out of that ancient mystery tradition and awakened and illuminated some people. And they went, whoa, what happens if we apply this formula? We have freedom, we'll have progress, we won't have all this like barbaric brutality soaking the earth with human blood. Era after era. We could have peace on earth and goodwill to men was the dream. The good people saw that as a noble dream. But they didn't want to take your property away. They actually included that as part of that dream. Others went, no, these guys, you're Illuminati communists, you're Illuminati Nazis, the first of the first, the original brands, who built both of those ideologies, by the way, out of the occult mystery schools, the warped version of it anyways. Well, here they are. They're under oath telling what is the ideology of the order that they are being accused of being a part of. And they're admitting that they're a part of it, and they're admitting that these are the goals. The baneful influence of accumulated property was declared an insurmountable obstacle to the happiness of any nation. It was taught that the preponderancy of good in the ultimate result consecrated every mean employed, and that wisdom and virtue consisted in properly determining this balance. This appeared big with danger, because it appeared that nothing would be scrupled at if we could make it appear that the order could derive advantage from it, because the great object of the order was held as superior to every consideration, like all the cults. Do your views align with the views of the order? The sacred holy order? If they do not, well, what happens in feudal medieval Europe? What happens in communist China? What happens in Cambodia? What happens in Russia, Germany? Blah, we could just, all of them, to people that have their own opinions and don't follow the rules of the order. We all know what happens. They concluded, he says, by saying that the method of education made them all spies on each other and on all around them. The method of education made them all spies in the Illuminati, an underground secret society seeking to violently overthrow the established order in Germany and thereby take over the country and completely, radically change its creed. This is where you're going to get an insight into what really was the goal, the occult goal of the occult order of the Nazi Party in Germany, that it was designed to destroy the German Empire, the German society, that otherwise, under the tutelage and leadership of good and moral men, could have gone in a totally different direction. You'll see the same exact situation when it comes to the nation of Iran. And that's an interesting tale. And you got to talk to some actual Iranian people who know what they're talking about. And I dare you to listen to what they have to tell you. I double dog dare you. Go find an elderly, educated Iranian who has fled to the West and interview them. And I'll drop the mic on that one. It is amazing how similar that story is to this story. Is it a coincidence? Everywhere we go, there we are with our traumatized psyches, right? So let's continue. He's got more to say. This gets interesting because this is the roots of all the ideologies that are being pushed into the minds of your kids in school, and you don't know where it originated from. He goes on, the discernment of pupils in these matters, there you go, is learned by questions which are given them from time to time to discuss. Oh, and yeah, and just to rewind, sorry, I was trying to make another point on that first slide. When he's saying they concluded that by saying that the method of education within the order made them all spies on each other and in all around them. This is what happens in any version of the totalism philosophy. Every time you got the Stasi police made up of citizens, citizen reporting. What happened during COVID? The launch of the Great Reset, which is neo-feudalism, right? Stakeholder capitalism. We'll get to that. But also, what really pinged my memory, if you go to my list of episodes, of premium episodes on my Substack, and I do have that, by the way, pinned to the top of my Substack page. So anybody that is a subscriber, first of all, thank you very much. We'll make it worth your while. Pinned to the top is the list of all those episodes. They're linked. You can just click from there and go right to the episodes. So you don't have to worry about scrolling for hours trying to find it, okay? And the one you want to get to is the dark side of Tibetan Buddhism. I've been harping on this one too, okay? Because the story that Christine Chandler tells in this, I based it off of her book, about exactly what went down when she spent 20 years studying with these lamas in Tibet, is that they adopted the revolutionary Marxist playbook into the Lamic cult. That's exactly what it was. And what did she say they did? And she experienced this. The method of education made them all spies on each other and all around them. That's what she said. I could give you many other testimonies from like the Raelians and some of these other cults where it would turn into the same thing. The little secret police reporting to the masters, spying on your neighbors and your friends, you know? So anyways, the discernment of the pupils in these matters is learned by questions which are given them from time to time to discuss. These are managed with delicacy and circumspection, that the timid may not be ashamed. In like manner, the political doctrines of the order are inculcated with the utmost caution. Yeah, no doubt. No one would really buy it if they gave you the whole script. After the mind of the pupil has been warmed by the pictures of universal happiness, this is your average leftist today, right? Pictures of universal happiness, and convinced that it is a possible thing to unite all the inhabitants of earth into one great society. And after it has been made out, in some measure to the satisfaction of the pupil, that a great addition of happiness is gained by the abolition of national distinctions and animosities. It may frequently be hard to task. It may frequently be no hard task to make him think that patriotism, meaning true love for your country, is a narrow-minded, monopolizing sentiment, and even incompatible with the more enlarged views of the order, namely, the uniting of the whole human race into one great and happy society. Now, John Robeson is he's giving you a little sarcasm there, because he's critiquing this, And of course, they're going to tell you guys it's all about the brotherhood of man. It's all about uniting the world. It's all about peace, love, and kumbaya. It's all about lifting up the little guy and fighting for the little guy. It's all the things you like to hear if you are the little guy. Keep in mind, these members of these orders are joining the order for a reason. They are joining the order because they want to advance their position in society and they want to get access to secret knowledge. And as the time in that order continues for them, they then realize that this is about monopolizing power. And if you want to monopolize power and do this to the entire world, we got east, west, north, south, different ideologies, different religions, different belief systems, different civilizations, right? How do you get them all under the ring of one powerful mafia don? How do you do that? Well, you're not going to sell them by saying, guys, we need to create a global totalitarian system to govern and micromanage every fine detail of your life for every single human being living or yet to live on this planet. Nobody would buy it. That's why he's saying they would conceal the full picture, but just kind of give you all the fairy dust. Look at this, guys. We're going to go to the ninth dimension above human. Just drink the Kool-Aid, man. It's all good, buddy. This world is fallen anyways. Let it fall. Join us. Right? The same shit. Different pile. And they want a happy society. Yeah, happy. Well, happy and, drugged up. Fake happy. Not real happy. Not fulfilled. Nothing based on something deeper than just some surface level happiness. He continues, the authority of the ruling powers is therefore represented as of inferior moral weight to that of the order. These powers are despots. This is what they're chanting in the bullhorns right now. These powers are despots when they do not conduct themselves by its principles, meaning that of the order. And it is therefore our duty to surround them with its members, so the members of the order, so that the profane may have no access to them. The profane would be like, okay, let me clear this up about profane. In the Masonic world, the profane are the gullible masses, the sheep, okay? In Judaism, they call the gullible sheep masses the goyim. In Christianity, they call them the sinners. In Buddhism, I forget the name of it, but there is a name for this. In the conspiracy world, we call them the sheep. There's many terms for this, and everybody has their term, okay? But it came from the original brass, all right? Just so everybody knows. The profane. Thus, we are able most powerfully to promote its interests, meaning that of the order. If any person is more disposed to listen to princes than to the order, he is not fit for it and must rise no higher. We must not do our utmost to procure the advancement of Illuminati into all important civil offices. And thus the great infiltration began. Hundreds of years ago. Infiltration instead of invasion. This is the script. This is the original. And guess what? The Bavarian Illuminati didn't invent this either. They're picking up the scraps of history, right? They went into that big warehouse in Indiana Jones at the end and started looking through those boxes, found a recipe for success. He continues, all mention of degrees or other business of the order must be carefully avoided, even in the meetings with other members. Quote, for the order wishes to be secret and to work in silence, for thus it is better secured for the oppression of the ruling powers, and because this secrecy gives a greater zest to the whole. By way of secrecy, by way of promise, good men are enslaved. They insinuated themselves into all public offices, and particularly, listen to this, into courts of justice. Think about that, guys. 1700s, they're getting in Illuminati members that hold the ideals of a secret society occult order higher than the constitutions of the country that they're supposed to be sitting as a judge on that bar for. So they're a bunch of secret handshaking assholes that have allegiances elsewhere than the allegiances that they're putting out in public. They're wearing costumes. This is the problem. This is how they operate. This is how the fascists operated. That's how the Nazis got in slowly into Germany. That's how the communists got their way into all these other countries. That's how they're getting into your country right now. If you live in America, guess what we call that same thing? It's the deep state. This is the original deep state playbook right here. And they get them into the courts of justice. Once you have the courts of justice, how can you prosecute corrupt government officials? How can you use the law, which is there to supposedly protect the freedom and liberty of all these citizens? How do you use it to actually either stand for justice, or how do you use it to warp justice so that it benefits the goals of the holy order? And all you got to do is have a bunch of believers, right? Make me a believer. These people want to be a believer. And they got pulled into the best of the best that know how to do it. You get some judges on your docket, you've got control in the country you can't even buy with money. So he continues on. In like manner, the chairs in the University of Ingolstadt were, with only 2 exceptions, occupied by Illuminati. So there's the other place you want to go. So guys, take notes on the playbook. The playbook is known. You can know it right now. Capture the courts, capture the universities. It all comes downhill from there. There's many professors in Canada that have gone public to say all these weird, freaky ass ideas that you're seeing flying around, right? They all got birthed in the universities. All the radical woke ingredients were birthed in universities. They didn't just come out of the ether. Think about that when I'm telling you, hundreds of years ago, there was a very elite occult group that mastered how to do this. Courts, universities. What's next? What else did they do? Quote, rulers who are members must be promoted through the ranks of the order only in proportion as they acknowledge the goodness of its great object and manner of procedure. Its object may be said to be the checking the tyranny of princes, nobles, and priests, and establishing a universal equality of condition and religion. Equality. There's a word you might hear now and then. The public is now informed, quote, that such a religion is contained in the order, is the perfection of Christianity, and will be imparted to him in due time. So what they did is they went in and they tweaked it. They tweaked all the dogma. And they're like, look, we've perfected it all. We've perfected it. There's a virtue in humanity wanting to perfect that which they perceive to be imperfect. But there are some thinkers that would also say this is also one of the pathways to evil if you're not aware. If you don't know how to wield that power of perfecting something. You're missing the point. Because nature is perfection, right? And you are made from that perfection. And the imperfectness that human left brain looks at it from their traumatized position and go, oh, it's imperfect, we've got to fix it. This constant fixing of things that actually don't need to be fixed. Because nature already knows how to do this. Like we can't even reconstruct the complexity of the human eyeball, no matter how hard we try. It's just, there's millions and millions of like elements that produce the human eye and give us the ability to see and then connect it to everything else. And like, so there's a perfection in nature that is, look at the timing of the movement of the sun and the sky and the big giant Swiss watch we got happening all around us. Look at the perfection of the details that you're going to see in every plant, every leaf. I was just talking to my daughter about this to clear up any disinformation she might come across about collectivistic doctrines. I obviously don't use those fancy terms with her, break it down easy. But where I was saying, here's an example to show you your uniqueness, okay? Because it's easy to feel like you're just another face in the mob. So you're just another young little girl running around and, oh, there's millions of those. What's special about you? And so all you have to do to understand specialness and perfection in nature is just go look at the tree in the backyard. Okay, it's in a classification of a tree. And then within that classification, that tree has branches and leaves. And you go, well, if I look from a distance, that tree looks like it's the same as all the other trees. But then you get a little closer and the tree itself is slightly different in many ways. And actually, the more you look at it, you see more differences from all the other like trees, all the birch trees, all the pines, right? So they're in their categories. So we have tree category, then we have different trees. And then we have within those categories, every single tree is slightly different. And then now you go study the bark, and the pattern of the bark is different. And then you study the leaves and the branches. The branches are a little different. The leaves, every leaf is just slightly different, right? Every little snowflake falling from the ground is just slightly different. It's a perfect geometry, but just slightly very. So nature doesn't do things collectively. That is when you hear these illuminists talking about, well, nature collectivizes and nature is basically just repeating a bunch of collective variations, that is distorted editing that's happened at the premise of the arguments of these illuminists that want to build collectivism as the premise for this beautiful utopia they keep talking about. That's where it went wrong, is they misunderstood nature. That's a pretty big misunderstanding, wouldn't you think? Maybe that is why all these experiments that are birthed from this ideology, the tree of this ideology, the roots of it, maybe that's why it always ends up in poverty, misery, tyranny, genocide, murder, and the death of freedom and humanity. And it causes nothing but division in a negative way, is because they're wrong. They're just wrong. We know they're wrong because the proof of their experiment is that it constantly turns into hell, not heaven. It's advertising heaven, but it never brings it, does it? It brings the opposite of that. The proof is in the pudding. So you can talk all the flowery, well, we just want to have a happy society. Yeah, but you've got your premise of reality wrong. And how are you going to build a beautiful civilization out of that? You're not. So you got to warp it, you got to redraft it, and you got to eliminate anything that's going to challenge you. He continues. The accounts given by the four professors confirm these suspicions. They declare upon oath that they make all these accusations in consequence of what they heard in the meetings and of what they knew of the higher orders. But since the time of the suppression by the elector, discoveries have been made which throw great light on the subject. And there's even more since John Robinson's time. A collection of original papers and correspondence was found by searching the house of one Zwack, a member, in 1786. The following year, a much larger collection was found at the house of Baron Bassus, and since that time, Baron Nige. He's talking about Baron von Nige, a major player in the Illuminati. You need to know who that man is. The most active member next to Weishaupt, that was von Nige, published an account of some of the higher degrees, which had been formed by himself. A long while after this were published, Noeste Albachung de Spartacus and Philo in der Illuminaten Orden and Hochir Grandum des Illum Ordens, these two works give an account of the whole secret constitution of the order, its various degrees, the manner of conferring them, the instructions to the entrance, and an explanation of the connection of the order with Freemasonry. Notice he said a connection of the order with Freemasonry, not Freemasonry itself, and a critical history. We shall give some extracts from such of these as have been published. There's no Illuminati, Dave. It's just a conspiracy theory. That's what my professor told me. Well, listen to this professor. He was there. Let's continue. Francois-Émile Babeuf. You heard this guy before? I did a whole presentation on Babeuf again, on Substack. Go to the list. The Occult Roots of Communism. I did a whole thing on that guy, okay? So take note of these names. He was 1760 to 1797. He was a member of the Illuminati. His pseudonym was Gracchus. They all have these little pseudonyms. They wear costumes. It's a lot of eyes wide shut shit, right? And as such, his social views reflected those of Weishaupt's. He formed a Masonic-like association of disciples called Baboufists, or Babouvists, who advocated violence as a means of achieving reform. What have I been saying for the last 4 shows? I've been saying it in my posts. I hope you're catching it. I'm trying to show a pattern here for you to recognize. They believe in violence. They believe in violence. That's all you got to say. You don't have to go through this presentation to someone that's coming at you from the other side or doesn't understand this and go, why don't you like this beautiful communistic Islamic protest movement happening all over the West? Why don't you like it? What's your problem with it? It's like, well, they believe in violence. That's the problem. That's the problem. That's their solution to everything. And that gives me a boatload of questions about the psychological condition that those people's minds are in. So that's the problem. And it didn't start with any of them, did it? I'm reading from you right now, where they're talking exactly about what the elite of the elite within the Illuminati, and trust me, guys, that they aren't even where the buck stops. That just, they were also, you got to get into the black nobility and then the Atonists and the Setians, and there's a whole layer of hierarchy that goes on at the high table, okay? But we're kind of zooming in here because it's a great place to start. And we're finding out that at the base of the precepts of the order, by which you shall swear a private allegiance to, and then go work in public office and do fake allegiances, and then work our order's agenda into the mix. They believe in violence. The fascists believe in violence. The Nazis believe in violence. The Islamists believe in violence. And that's how we know who they are. That's not self-defense. They're aggressive violence. Violence. Violate. Same root word. Okay? I'm not talking about using force to stop violators. That's different. These are the initiators of violence. You can read Jean-Paul Sartre. You can read Derrida. You can read from the London School of Economics, some of the top guys there advocating for violence. You can read their level of university professors in Canada and America and around the world, West today, advocating openly for violence. A professor was just shown at some rally the other day imitating Charlie Kirk getting shot in the neck. This is the people teaching your children. Adherence, whether they know it or not, most of them are just useful idiots, to a very ancient occult doctrine. It didn't just come out of nowhere. They advocated for violence as a means of achieving reform, and they proved it with their actions throughout history again and again and again. And they're talking about it right now. They met, he says, at the dining hall of the Abbey and sometimes in the crypt. Oh, it's creepy. The location of the building, which was near the Pantheon, led to the name of the order, which was known as the Pantheonists, or what Pantheonicites. I can't even say that word. The group at its peak had about 2,000 members. Babeuf wrote, quote, "In my system of common happiness, I desire that no individual property shall exist. The land is God's, and its fruits belong to all men in general." Sound familiar? One of his disciples, the Marquis d'Antonel, a former member of the Revolutionary Tribunal, wrote, quote, "The state of communism is the only just, the only good one. Without this state of things, no peaceful and really happy societies can exist." Does that sound familiar? In April 1796, Babeuf wrote his Manifesto of the Equals. I mean, what other title do you want, guys? It's just right in your face who these people are. The Manifesto of the Equals, in which nature does not produce anything equal, guys, which was published under the title Analysis of the Doctrine of Babeuf. In it, he wrote, quote, "No more private property in land. The land belongs to no one. The fruits of the earth belong to everyone. Vanish at last revolting distinctions of rich and poor, of great and small, of masters and servants, of governors and governed. Let there be no difference between men than that of age and sex." And Babeuf, I got a memo from the future for you. Your ideology got put into practice, just so you know. And if today, even sex is off the table of differences. Okay, so You started the trend, and it's now in mock level lunatic asylum. Just saying. Since all have the same needs and the same faculties, no, they do not have the same faculties. Let there be only one education, one kind of food. They content themselves with one son and heir for all. Why should not the same portion and the same quality of food suffice for each of them? And there we get each according to his ability and each towards his need, right? Sounds great. There's even part of you that agrees with him, isn't there? History practicing this ideology has some points of contention with that opinion, I must say. We've never had real communism, though. Right. Under his plan, workers wouldn't be paid in money since the owing of personal property would be abolished because money is property, guys. Instead, payment would be made through the distribution of products. These products stored in communal warehouses would be would be equally handed out. Another note, so they'd be equally handed out to the people and the farmers that were producing and getting up at 4:30 in the morning every day to bust their hinds, or the guys going into the mines, or the guys fighting on the front lines of wars. But mainly the producers in society, the ones doing all the work, get the same bowl of soup as the guy sitting there scratching his ass all day. That's how it goes. It's unsustainable. It's immoral. They'd be handed out equally. Another notable aspect of his plan was that children would not be allowed to bear the name of their father unless he was a man of great importance. So they still had men of great importance. Doesn't having a man of great importance indicate that there is some sort of a difference between different people, that men are not so equal? Like, that's the other thing. Go read Animal Farm by George Orwell. That clinches it. Everybody's equal, but some are not equal enough, right? Some are not quite as equal as others. Some are more equal than other people. Did you know that? So they're going to start with, we're all equal, because that's the little man syndrome. I need to be equal to the great man who does work hard. I don't want to work hard and follow his playbook. I like this guy's thing. It's just a jump to the end of the rainbow, like right away for the pot of gold. So I want to be equal. But then you find out, well, nature does take over. Human nature does take over, regardless of all the rhetoric. And eventually, A, you're equal in misery and poverty. And B, you're still not equal because you got the big commissars and the czars and the man of importance that shall never be questioned, and the people who write the doctrine. And there's still a control system. In fact, that's what it does. It goes from this beautiful communism, everybody's equal, fascism, whatever, and then it turns into the strong man who goes out and crushes anybody that challenges the holy precepts of the order, meaning somebody gets to make the decisions, meaning not everybody is equal, are they? So it's a lie. It's a big fat lie. That's what it is. In August 1796, Babeuf and 45 leaders of his movement were arrested after the government found out they were making preparations to lead a revolt of the people against them. They were put on trial in a proceeding that lasted from February to May 1797. The Illuminati was secretly directing the Babeuf's movement, and Babeuf testified that he was just an agent of the conspiracy. Quote, I attest they do for me too much honor in decorating me with the title of the head of this affair. It's ridiculous. I declare that I only had a secondary and limited part in it. The heads and the leaders needed a director of public opinion, and I was in the position to enlist this opinion. You can't blame me, guys. I was just following orders. Where's that familiar from? And on May 28, 1797, Babeuf was hung, and many of his followers were deported. So rest easy there, soldier. Those who have studied the Russian Revolution have observed that there is little difference between Babeufism and Bolshevism. The plot thickens. The Third International of Moscow in 1919, in its first manifesto, traced its descent from a Babeuf. The Russian Revolution may have been the ultimate goal of Babeuf, who wrote, quote, The French Revolution is only the forerunner of another revolution, very much greater, very much more solemn, and which will be the last. Aren't you hearing that from your jihadis today and your commies today and your woke right too? The fascist, whatever you want to call them. Same energy all the way through. Same modus operandi, same playbook, applied differently. Variations of the same poison pill. They're telling you this. They're saying exactly this. Oh, we got to jump back here. The French Revolution is only the forerunner of another revolution, very much greater, very much more solemn, and which will be the last. Have you been hearing rhetoric about the last revolution? Help collect this for me, guys. If you hear these rhetoric at these street interviews with protesters, if you see these guys on bullhorns talking about it, the last revolution, the last great war, the last one, this will be the revolution to end all revolutions. They've been saying that for hundreds of years. It's never the last one. Now, quick recap of feudalism, just to understand a little bit. This is definitely not a deep dive. There's a basic definition here. What is feudalism? Well, it's a hierarchical, decentralized socio-economic system based on land ownership, fiefs, serfdom, peasants bound to land, and reciprocal obligations between lords, vassals, and kings. Power was derived from birth, military service, and divine right, not elections or markets. Talk about free markets. So divine rights, this brings in more of a theocracy element. It's hierarchical. Definitely not everybody's equal. It's decentralized socioeconomic system, which is a real buzzword going around right now, but that's what we need. Interesting. It's all based on land ownership, but just like as in fascism, which we're going to find out who a lot of the far-right fascists today who want national fascism and national socialism to destroy communism, they are basically arguing for a very similar model. And I find that interesting. They might not see it, but it's all there. And it is based on some sort of divine right, right? So here's the basic ideology. Emphasize tradition, organic social order, aristocracy, which is not organic, and the church's role. It suppressed social mobility and individual rights in favor of stability and loyalty. See, they all go, guys, you get property. Don't worry. Well, we're going to assign a manager to your property. And that manager speaks to us at the top of the heap. And so we can take it away anytime we want. We can come in and kill off all your ostriches. We can come and get you to move off your property because now the local natives just declared that your property exists on their unceded territory. And so in Vancouver, we're going to send you a bunch of letters from the mayor to ask you to move out of your farm because of that. So really, you don't own your property. Really, you don't. Like, it's an illusion. Economic model, agrarian, corporatist, guilds and estates with minimal free markets, more proto-socialist in resource allocation than capitalist. And there's just a lovely picture. And it's basically a pyramid. Amazing. You got your freemen, independent peasants, serfs tied to the land, lords, tenant vassals, knights, abbots. You got nobles, barons, and bishops. You got the church and the king sitting at the top. And then above those guys are the people behind the throne. And they're just missing the capstone of that pyramid at the top. But that's how it works. That's how it worked then, how it works now. And then we got this thing called neo-feudalism. Just want to quickly segue on this one. Neo-feudalism or new feudalism is a theorized contemporary rebirth of policies of governance, economy, and public life, reminiscent of those which were present in many feudal societies. Such aspects include, but are not limited to, unequal rights. So that's a funny thing, right? Unequal rights. And legal protections for common people and for nobility. Dominance of societies by a small and powerful elite. The World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, Club of Rome, steering committees, high table, deep state, right? A lack of social mobility. You will be a vassal. You will be a serf for the rest of your life. You will be the cook for the rest of your life. You will be all the duties are sort of handed out to you. And relations of lordship and serfdom between the elite and the people, where the former are rich and the latter are poor. That's just a basic description of what we think it would be. Here's a little note that I found on that page. It was just bringing a summary of this. During the course of the years 2020 to 2021, Yanis Varoufakis has written and lectured much about his theory concerning neo-feudalism. He posits that traditional capitalism has evolved into a new feudal-like structure of economies and societies, which he refers to as techno-feudalism. My little gripe here is not that capitalism evolved into this. It's that true free market capitalism was assaulted, dismantled, and replaced by a fake form of capitalism, which then you could say evolved into what we have now, which is more akin to feudalism, social, all the totalitarianisms. But they leave that part out. And I wonder why. I'm always a little bit, I'm like, glad you're pointing out the common things here. But when you start saying that, I start to wonder if you've read a little bit of Baboof in your life. But anyways, Varoufakis explains that unlike in capitalism, feudal economies have the quality of being dominated by very small groups of people and predetermine the behaviors of markets as they see fit. Right, because the accusations by the Marxists of capitalism as it is today is that, well, as we've already had, it already is there. It's what capitalism is destined to create. That's their argument. But they're shooting at a straw man because we don't have true free market capitalism, which the only reason it came into being was specifically to get out of the dark age totalism that was there and basically separate government and state from the economy so that the average person could have equality of opportunity by way of merit. That's free market. That's not what the Marxists are critiquing, because that's not what we have. And their only argument is, well, it evolved into that. No, it didn't. You had molding hands behind the scenes, slowly changing it and evolving it into this. So you're not going to get away with that one. Come on. You got to do better. Taking the example of massive online enterprises such as Facebook, Amazon, and others, so this would be crony capitalism, Varoufakis noted that such venues are primarily governed by the whims of single individuals and small teams and are thus not truly capitalist markets of free trade. He's right about that, but rather feudal markets of stringent control. Others, such as Jeremy Pitt, have raised similar opinions and concerns, also noting that techno-feudalism threatens the freedom of information over the internet. And there's others that have basically pointed it out. And then, of course, we have this chap here who's, taking a little, actually, we'll cover his little trajectory in a moment and who replaced him in the World Economic Forum. Talking about Klaus Schwab, Uncle Klaus. In the year 2020, head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, published a book titled COVID-19 is the Great Reset. The book argues that the COVID-19 pandemic is an opportunity for politicians and governments to change the world's economy, societies, and structures of governments by introducing a system of stakeholder capitalism, doing so via the guidelines of a plan known as the Great Reset. Schwab also refers to his goals as the fourth industrial revolution. Other authors have criticized the Great Reset as being a form of neo-feudalism, and I would agree with them on that. And if you get into my Cult of the Medics, I get into the old knightly chivalric orders, such as the Knights Templar and the Knights of Malta, and some of these other groups who, it's a crazy history to get into. I don't have time to break it down. But my feeling is that these old nobility, papal, chivalric families from many places in the world, not just the West, saw their eye on the prize and finally collected all the data from all the previous totalist experiments that were running the Illuminati premise, in different variations. They finally got all the data, and then they constructed a hybrid. And we're going to get to more on that in a minute. And that's what this is. It's not pure feudalism. It's not pure fascism. It's not pure communism. It's a hybrid. It's sort of a remix of all the best flavors of the month from the past. Now, here's the chap that has replaced Mr. Klaus Schwab. Norwegian ex-minister takes over World Economic Forum. Now, are his allegiances to the Norwegians or to a globalist secret fraternity? That's going to be the question everybody's going to have to ask about all their public officials now. Here's from the article from the Nordic Times. After nearly 54 years, 86-year-old globalist and technocrat Klaus Schwab has decided to step down as executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. Instead, the new leader will be Norway's former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Bilderberg top Borgbrend. The World Economic Forum has evolved into one of the world's premier power conferences where world leaders, lobbyists, media moguls, bankers, entrepreneurs, and other power brokers come together to discuss the state of the world and decide which agendas to focus on. I hope everybody here has done their research on the Bilderberg group. Oh, there he is. They're all sitting together. We got Uncle Klaus, we got Twinkle Toes Trudeau, and we got this new head guy. Schwab has also been heavily criticized for his high salary, equivalent to almost 1 million Swedish crowns a month, and for his organization financially benefiting various private companies linked to Schwab and his family. I mean, his bio sounds very much about the concerns we have about Trudeau and Macron and the rest of these guys. Because guess what? They were all the acolytes of the higher guys that we're looking at right now. So they're all operating the same way. However, the profited globalist will not be leaving the WEF altogether, but will take up a new role as non-executive chairman of the forum. From the WEF, they write in a statement, the organization has undergone a planned governance evolution from a founder-driven organization to one in which a chairman and board will take executive responsibility. His successor, Borgbrend, has been at the helm of the WEF since 2017 and has been responsible for many of its day-to-day operations for some time. So you see how they kind of groom the next guy? He's been in there for a long time before we ever heard his name, and then he just comes out of nowhere and they got a switcheroo going on. Just take note of how these guys operate. Brend, who has a long background in Norway's liberal conservative Horn Party, I don't know how to say that, has served as the country's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of the Environment, and Minister of Trade and Industry. He is also a member of the Bilderberg Group's steering committee. So sounds like a lovely chap. He's going to do some good things with that WEF. Well, let's go, guys. Let's go right now to who you can learn about this hybrid version that I'm telling you about and what the goal was. This is Tragedy and Hope, another book you need on your shelf. A History of the World in Our Time. It was published in 1966 by Professor Carroll Quigley of Georgetown University, highly esteemed by his former student, William Jefferson Blythe Clinton, Mr. Billy Boy. This is what Quigley has to say. He was an insider, guys. He was at their meetings. He was part of hearing out what this plan was for the Western world and the world at large. He said, the powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. Here we go. This system, he says, was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements, arrived at in frequent private meetings, Bilderberg, and conferences, WEF, World Economic Forum, World Health Organization. The apex of the system was the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, home of the Templars. A private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. The growth of financial capitalism, crony capitalism, made possible a centralization of world economic control and use of this power for the direct benefit of financiers and the indirect injury of all other economic groups. So this is like geoeconomic warfare, just applied to the highest level. Feudalist fashion, arrived at in secret conferences and meetings over a long period of time, and slowly being basically installed in every country in the West. 1966. Confirming what the original Illuminati plan was in 1776. Are we coincidence theorists? Or are we conspiracy researchers. You tell me. Now, I'm going to go through this article. I felt it was a great write up because we were having some debates on X recently about the differences between these two forms and versions of the totalitarian Gatorade. This is entitled Nazis, Communists, Fascists, Socialists, and Other Flavors of Collectivism and Authoritarianism. This is from Dan Mitchell, who wrote it in 2019. He did a good summary. He says, I've written about how totalitarian ideologies such as communism and Nazism have a lot in common. Both subordinate the individual to the state, and both give the state power over the economy, and both slaughter millions of people. Yeah, Michael calls these the opposames. We got a bunch of opposames. They're all the same underneath, but they look opposite on the surface. So he clarifies it here. And this is a good sentence to look at when you're having debates with people about this. The battle is not right versus left. It's statism versus individualism. Or better put, it's collectivism versus individualism, because statism is merely the mechanism by which collectivism holds power. Collectivism isn't just you go into a concert to watch a concert and clap and cheer when everybody else claps and cheers, or going to hockey. That's not collectivism. Okay. There's shared experiences with fellow humans. Collectivism is very specifically a political ideology, and we are going through the premise of it right now in this series. So just hopefully we understand that, okay? We'll start with an article from Bradley Berzer, published by Intellectual Takeout. He worries that totalitarianism on the left is making a comeback, and he says this. In 1936, you had three choices: National Socialism, International Socialism, or dignity. In 2018, we find ourselves in similar circumstances. Why is this happening now? First, we scholars have failed to convince the public of just how wicked all forms of communism were and remain. Almost all historians ignore the most salient fact above the 20th century, that governments murdered more than 200 million innocents, the largest massacre in the history of the world. Where's your protests for that? Where's your protest for that? Where's the outrage? Oh, there's support for more? Oh, is anybody surprised? There's a bunch of fake outrage about other things, but not any real organic outrage about things that actually matter, like this. Terror reigned in the killing fields, the Holocaust camps, and the gulags. Second, an entire generation has grown up never knowing such things as the Soviet gulags or even the Berlin Wall. Most younger defenders of communism buy into the oldest propaganda line of the left, that real communism has never been tried. That is their only argument, guys. He explains that fascism and socialism are two sides of the same coin, which is what I've been arguing as well. He says that the National Socialists embrace socialism is factually accurate. They did nationalize very vital industry in Germany, even if by outright intimidation rather than through the law. In his personal diaries, Joseph Goebbels wrote in late 1925, quote, "It would be better for us to end our existence under Bolshevism than to endure slavery under capitalism." For a few months later, he continued, "I think it's just a terrible idea that we and the communists are bashing in each other's heads." Whatever the state of the rivalry between the two camps, Goebbels claimed, the two forces should ally and conquer. There's alliances between opponents on the board? What? The Italian fascists had even closer ties to the Marxists, with Mussolini having begun his career as a Marxist publicist and writer. A few Italian fascists even held positions in the Comintern. And Sheldon Richman expands on this theme. He says, fascism is socialism with a capitalist veneer. Let me just say that again in case you missed it. Fascism is socialism with a capitalist veneer, not a capitalist ingredient, not a capitalist premise, the veneer. We have to create the capitalist veneer so that we can put our other enemy that we created also to attack that veneer. And now everybody's attacking the veneer, and the real shit is being left under the rug. Nobody knows. And that's why we keep popping into one form of totalitarian of the other, because we've been fighting straw men this whole time. It's a brilliant tactic. I mean, you got to hand it to them. The word fascism derives from fasces or fasci, the Roman symbol of collectivism and power, a tied bundle of rods with a protruding axe. Where socialism sought totalitarian control of a society's economic processes through direct state operation of the means of production, fascism sought that control indirectly through domination of nominally private owners. Where socialism abolished all market relations outright, fascism left the appearance, the veneer of market relations while planning all economic activities. Where socialism abolished money and prices, fascism controlled the monetary system and set all prices and wages politically. And the reason for that difference, guys, in my opinion, if we're talking from the high table level, the guys looking at the big chessboard, not the people stuck down here, they went, we need to put the same premise from the Gracchus Illuminati guys into practice. But they had many debates about what was the best bowl of chili, like what was the best ingredients that makes the best bowl of chili? Well, we got to maybe do some experiments, and I'll have one type of chili made for this guy and one for the other. And then we talk about it, they share, and they go, yeah, I like this one, or I like Coke better than Pepsi, pick your metaphor. And then they go, wait a minute, actually, we can work with both of these things, because they realize demographics are different than other demographics. Some cultures look at things differently than others, right? A lot of that's due to their religious priesthoods that they've been listening to. So we got to tailor make a system for Germans, industrious, high IQ, very, it's interesting culture, right? Germany, the history. They're a very elitist society. So we can't just go bring them a bunch of Russian communism written by people like Marx and Engels. They're going to spit on that, which they did. But we want to get to the same end goal. So we'll sell them this version that sounds a lot more reasonable. Like, well, you're going to have a little bit of private property, little citizen. But we do have the big strong man who's going to tell you what to do with it. And therefore, you're free. Meanwhile, the communists are just honest about the fact that you're not going to own any private property. You see how it goes? It's fucking brilliant. Like evil brilliant, Next up, he explains the vast gulf between capitalism and fascist economies. Entrepreneurship was abolished. State ministries, rather than consumers, determined what was produced and under what conditions. Fascism is to be distinguished from interventionism or the mixed economy. Interventionism seeks to guide the market process, not eliminate it, as fascism did. Under fascism, the state, through official cartels controlling all aspects of manufacturing, commerce, finance, and agriculture, planning boards set product lines, production levels, prices, wages, working conditions, and the size of firms. Licensing was ubiquitous. No economic activity could be undertaken without government permission. Excess incomes had to be surrendered as taxes or loans, kind of like my life in Canada. Since government policy aimed at autarky or national self-sufficiency, protectionism was necessary. Imports were barred or strictly controlled. Fascist governments also undertook massive public works projects financed by steep taxes, borrowing, and fiat money creation. That is another major signal that we're dealing with Illuminist totalitarianism. They perfected that through the Swiss banks. These are not new observations. Here's what Ludwig von Mises wrote on this topic back in the 1940s, okay? Mises says, the Marxians have resorted to polylogism because they could not refute by logical methods the theories developed by bourgeoisie economics or the inferences drawn from these theories demonstrating the impracticability of socialism. As they could not rationally demonstrate the soundness of their own ideas or the unsoundness of their adversaries' ideas, they have denounced the accepted logical methods entirely. The German nationalists had to face precisely the same problem as the Marxians. They also could neither demonstrate the correctness of their own statements nor disprove the theories of economics and praxeology. They thus they took shelter under the roof of polylogism, prepared for them by the Marxians. Remember the guys that came out and graduated from the Philadelphian Lodge? Of course, they concocted their own brand of polylogism. Neither Marxian nor Nazi polylogism ever went further than to declare that the logical structure of mind is different with various classes or races. Polylogism is not a philosophy or an epistemological theory. It is an attitude of narrow-minded fanatics. And those fanatics are motivated by hate. The Nazis hate people of different races and religions, while the Marxians hate people of different incomes and classes. Same shit, different pile. Now, just a couple notes here. Despite being positioned at seemingly opposite ends of the political spectrum, communism and fascism share a surprising number of similarities. Understanding how are communism and fascism alike requires delving beyond the surface level rhetoric and examining their practical implementations and core tenets. Hence why I've been trying to encourage everybody on this show and continue to encourage myself to do that. That is what gets me going. This is research. You got to go past the surface level of rhetoric and you got to examine with a fine-tooth comb and a magnifying glass the practical implications of the core tenets of the philosophy, meaning get to the premise. That's where you're going to find the golden goose. So let's do it. Number one, centralized state control. This is a great place to start. If you can't remember anything else, remember this one when you're at the dinner table with somebody arguing this with you. Both communism and fascism rely on a powerful state, meaning the crowd, to control many aspects of life, including the economy, education, and culture, which are the pillars of civilization. Number two, suppression of individual rights. This is the biggest one for me. In both systems, individual freedoms are limited, with the state or collective goals taking priority over personal rights. That's where I want to have nothing to do with it. Number three, economic intervention. Communism. The state owns and controls all production, eliminating private property. Remember that quote from Gracchus? Fascism allows private ownership, but heavily regulates businesses to align with national goals, which just so happen to align with the goals of the high table fraternity behind the lodge doors that a lot of your public members are secret handshaking assholes and are a part of. They don't hold allegiance to you. You will know them by their fruits. They hold allegiance to these people. They hold allegiance to an ideology. They're religious fanatics. That's how you have to look at it. Here's another big hint: suppression of dissent. Both establish one-party rule, use secret police, surveillance, and violence to silence opposition, because they believe in violence, guys, and to eliminate political pluralism. Number six, nationalism and collectivism. Communism, theoretically internationalist, but often promotes nationalism in practice. Example, Stalin's socialism in one country. You ever read about that? Check it out. Fascism strongly emphasizes national identity and unity. Now, this is where the left is going to call everybody that's not left fascist, because they just read this and they go, oh, that's fascist, strongly emphasizes national identity and unity. There you go. They don't understand what that's talking about. There's nothing wrong with establishing unity in your country and having a strong national identity. All societies have always had something like that. Everybody that we're importing from other countries into the West has that ideal. They're literally extending their national pride or cultural pride or religious pride. They're extending it to you. That's how strong it is. Whereas here, we're all just, oh, we don't even know what it is. What is it to be Canadian? Does that even exist? Do we just like hockey and drink maple syrup every day? Like, That's what it is to be a Canadian? We don't even know anymore. And we fired Don Cherry for even asking the question. Like, so what does it mean, right? Doesn't mean because you're emphasizing national identity and unity that you're somehow a fascist. That's not the only thing. It's just that in this category, because you got to remember, you'd have to have this category, national identity and unity. You'd have to have that also with the other points, right? Patriotism could also be looked at as being emphasizing national identity and unity. Do you emphasize and have a bias towards your own family over other people's families? This is a human thing, right? So just don't get that confused, because that's a trick that they use to label you a fascist when it's not the case. And I did a whole show called Fascism: An Actual Definition. You might want to check that one out to get more details. Number 7, use of propaganda. Is this going to sound familiar to anybody? Both versions control media and education. So there's no freedom of the press, no freedom of education to shape public opinion. That's what it's for. To spread ideology. That's what it's for. And to indoctrinate citizens from a young age. That's why the Illuminati took over the courts, so they couldn't get tried when they then went after the universities. The article highlights that despite appearing as opposites, this is just a summary, right? So it's a summary of a bunch of articles. Communism and fascism share key traits like state dominance, suppression of dissent, and collectivism, just to keep it simple. But we can go a little deeper. There's a great meme. What if I told you, Neo, that fascism, Nazism, socialism, and communism are all just variants of collectivism? What if I told you? Okay. Now, in the previous writings of John Robeson recounting the admissions under oath in court of these Illuminati guys who were talking about alliances, it made me think of something I've been trying to talk about. There's been many voices out there also. Well, not many, a few voices out there talking about this. We've been doing deep dives on the origins of all these alliances on Unslaved, and make sure to go check us out also on Substack. It's all there. That there's been some, what we call an unholy alliance that began, let's say, post World War II, between a lot of these different factions. Okay. You got the socialists, the Socialist International, which is the communists. Okay. Same. And then you've got the fascists, the Nazi version coming out of the occult roots of the Thule Society. They were, by the way, the Thule Society and the Nazis branded themselves the New Templars. And that'll open up the whole door into the history of the Templars, the real history, not the glorified fake one, the real one. And there was an alliance made between West and East, between Western totalitarian systems and Eastern totalitarian systems that go way back, way back, way back, playback. So you're talking about, that's why I brought up in part 1, the meeting of Nazi and his top SS officials with the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who was basically the Pope of Islam. And we started to see this sort of Nazi fascist ideology, this little version of it being incubated in the Middle East. And then the Nazis and the Germans found out, oh, wait a minute, they've been doing this to a very successful degree for a long time. We should learn from them. So what did the Hitler and the Nazis do? They sent a bunch of emissaries to the East. You see references of this in like Indiana Jones and a lot of the lore. But there's a whole history of how the Nazis went. And what was it that fascinated them with the East? The remarkable ability of the Islamic tradition, the Islamic cults, which we did a whole dissection of where that originated from as well. Would it surprise you to know that it also came from very secret underground societies in the Middle East? The same that the communist fascist brand in the West was incubated in secret societies in Europe and America? Would it surprise you to know that a similar program was done in the Middle East that was even more ancient, that was discovered by the Crusaders? East meets West, unholy alliance. And then you got a lot of Eastern lore, mysticism, and symbolism coming into Masonry and Templarism after the Crusades. Is that a coincidence? And then it's reborn with the new Templars visiting and forming a new, fresh alliance with the Mufti. And that's just one instance. There's so many more anecdotes we could go through. And then you go, well, where does the West fit into this today? Well, I mean, to me, it was fascinating to find out that, and I said this in part one, I just recently learned this while I was doing some recordings with Michael Tsarian, and he was bringing up, he wasn't just saying it, he was bringing up the receipts and showing me I was like, oh my God, that this alliance had indeed been formed and that they wanted to learn from them, and that the Nazis were absolutely fascinated with Islam because of how they didn't want to become Middle Eastern like Islamists. They were fascinated to learn the playbook that was built in this Middle Eastern region that was so successful at being the number one colonizing invasive force that literally forged 55 nations across the deserts of the Middle East in a pretty short period of time, historically speaking. And to this moment has had, honestly, the dream within a dream level of control over the hive. Like no one had, they believed, when you read the writings of these Nazis and their admiration for what Islam had achieved, that they were trying to achieve with the Germans, and that the these different groups are trying to achieve with Western peoples, they couldn't believe the level of success that experiment in the Middle East had with the Eastern Illuminati faction. The Eastern Illuminati is all of these, I would say this goes back to the Templars that never came back home, or came back home converted and then brought that into the lodges and spread that through all that period of history. And then it happened again with the Nazis. You find out that some of the top Nazis who were commissioned to keep going on these missions to the Middle East to get this information. How did they achieve this level of control over their people? How did they achieve the perfected, that's how they looked at it, the perfected article of totalitarianism, our dream? How did they do it? It's like the revolutionary faith spoken of by Billington in The Fire in the Minds of Men, another mandatory book. If you want to understand this, I mean, I don't want to be totalitarian about it. He talked about the fire in the minds of men. The Nazis and the Templars both couldn't believe what they were reading and what they were seeing. They couldn't believe how trained these people were. They couldn't believe how easy it was. They were like, what's missing from our little soup that we're trying to make? Our soup is bland. Theirs is rich. Because these are people that want power. And they forgot that a lot of the mystery school tradition from the ancient times was hidden in the Middle East. And that there's a whole history of the Iranian Persian Empire that we didn't get taught about. We didn't get taught about all the elements that built the Ottoman Empire. And then we didn't get taught about the alliances that were formed even before World War I between Turkey and Germany. Maybe just a strategic alliance to begin with, but it became an ideological alliance. So you find out the top Nazi brass convert eventually to Islam, and they are brought out by the Vatican rat lines and the CIA, which is the Vatican, the Knights of Malta. Every single founding member of the CIA was a Knight of Malta. So there's your little giveaway. And then they pull them out, the top guys. They put some of these guys in America. They put some of them in like Latin America. They put them, and they also, a bunch of them went to Egypt. This was missing for me. They went to Egypt. They fled to Egypt after the war. Top Nazis. They already had relationships and deals done. Don't forget. Unholy alliance. They looked up to these guys. They look up to these imams. They looked up to these great leaders, to them. And they converted, and they were fascinated with it. Because you'd be, if you're a power hungry maniac, you're like, who perfected this protocol. Like, how do we do this? And if ours is getting our arse kicked out in Germany, we're getting flushed out. Don't forget the similar thing happened in Germany, the Bavarian Illuminati, when they were rounded up and arrested as a terrorist group. Everybody went, "Oh, see, Dave, the Illuminati disappeared. They went underground." Sorry. Keep reading mainstream history from your Marxist professors. Uh, you forgot about the clerical order behind the Knights Templar. The knights themselves, half of them couldn't even read and write. Okay. So they're just brutes sent out to do what knights and brutes do. The Knights Templar is not just a military order. That's the military that represents the clerical order, which is the ideological order, the cult behind it, that has the money, the wealth, the knowledge, the symbolism, access to the archive, the real seedy mofos. Okay. So these top Nazis after World War II flee to Egypt and convert to Islam. And what do? They start continuing the project that was started in Germany through the Islamic regimes, the Islamic jihadist fundamentalists. That's where you're going to find out when you find out later in Gulf War, the Gulf War era, your George Bush seniors linked to Prescott Bush, one of the funders of the Nazi Party, is the one going to the Middle East to topple Hussein and to continue the project from the Western Front and fund and build up all of these jihadi extremist, as they call them, Islamic terror groups. And the deep state in America, both Republican and Democrat, have been continuing that because they're run by the Knights of Malta, who are the Nazis, who are liaison and have an unholy alliance with the Eastern Wing. You see how it all fits? And there's more to it. I'm just trying to give you the best sketch without having to spend 25 hours reading through it all that I can give you. That's a bombshell. Do you realize what a bombshell is? That's missing from everybody's analysis of all the things happening. And that's why I think everybody's off. And they're falling for psyops. They're missing the point because they missed this. So, oh, yeah, I got to do this first. So let me just. So Prescott Bush, you got the Bush family, their skull and bones. Don't forget the symbol of the skull and bones didn't start with pirates on the Caribbean, okay? Who were the pirates of the Caribbean? The piratical families, the Silesian pirates. The other agreements were done by royal elites in the British Empire and in these other empires. And the Knights Templar also adopted the skull and bones as a symbol. I can't remember what show I did with this one. It might have even been the Occult Conspiracy. But I show you all the symbolism and regalia from the Nazis, and we compare it to the Vatican, and we compare it to the Templars and the Masons. And the skull and bones is a massive symbol because that's a Gnostic symbol coming out of John the Baptist, that's Knights of Malta, who were the Knights Hospitallers, who were formerly the Order of St. John of Jerusalem. And none of that story is what you've been told by your priests either, okay? You've been lied to a lot about that. We've been going through that chapter and verse on the Unslaved podcast recently if you want to get into it. But we'll bracket that. Is it a coincidence that in Yale University, there's actually something called the Order of Skull and Bones? Right? The pirates of your economy and your government who swear to the order, not to your constitutions. So it's a big jigsaw puzzle, but when you put it all together, it makes things, to me, if you're plugging all these points in, now when you analyze what's happening right now, it should make a lot more sense. My mind is blown on a daily basis to see constant confirmations of this and how many people are unaware of it. It kind of blows my mind. And I was unaware of it, so I feel you, but man, I keep doing this. Okay. So anyways, I'm trying to remind myself where the next track is. All right. So Bush connection. Got all these connections, Templar connection, Nazi connection, Islamist connection, all different brands of totalism, totalitarianism. They all start to form an alliance because they all hate the antithesis of totalitarianism. That's what they're unified by. These are dogs that are fighting over scraps of power. Okay, this is Game of Thrones, the show. This is what it is, and they're just waiting to see on the local level, on the lower level. They like Islam has its agenda of world caliphate. The Nazi had their agenda of Nazi domination. The socialists want the Socialist International. They want a worldwide socialist government run by an elect few, the World Council. The communists had their version. They all have their grand design, right? And so they're willing to go, well, our differences, like you got those admissions from some of the like globals, like we shouldn't be like arguing with these communists, man. We should actually take a chapter out of their book, and vice versa. We see these dialogues, right? They're willing to form alliances to achieve the same goal, which is to destroy not just the West and America and the constitutions and the legal and all that, which, yes, has become corrupted, but in its uncorrupted form would actually be very robust against totalitarianism. They need to destroy that. That's why we've slowly been getting imploded economically, politically, legally, educationally. And now they get to throw it at the straw man, all the accusations. But the real deal, the premise that was taken from that same canon of ancient mystery knowledge that built the positive elements of the West, that made the West the envy of the world, that actually encapsulated the idea of a free individual that does have private property rights, personal autonomy rights, free speech rights, all these things, right? Isn't it interesting that that notion also came from the occult world as well as the antithesis of it from these guys? That's fascinating. But regardless, they make alliances because they have a shared goal. When the goal is achieved, it's going to be a battle between the mafias to see who then takes the crown in the ring of power. The communists and the leftists think, erroneously, that they're going to take out Islam the moment they let Islam through the gates to do its job. And the Islamists are like, no, we're going to take out the lefties. We're just using them. We're voting left. We hate them. But we're voting for them because they're going to let us through the front gate. And we have our own religious dogma that we would like to impose on the whole society. They're saying it like every day out in the open, like all over the place. They're just saying it. Media doesn't tell you, right? Nobody blinks. They're like, yeah, they must be just pulling our leg. Like they don't really mean that they're going to create a global jihad revolution and then take over all the governments and like create a global caliphate or whatever. They would never mean that when they say it. And the communists, when they say they want to turn it all into a communist, they're not meaning that when they say it, right? Like we can't be so naive. And they all have their own objective, and they all think they're going to win out. And what's going to happen is, let's just say they all achieve the destruction of West and everything in it. Now what? Well, who's going to be the one lined up and shot? Well, whoever's got the most power. I'm here to tell you there's a layer above all of that that's just watching. I have a sneaking suspicion we're talking about something that's not really even human in the way that we think about it. You could take that any way you want. But either way, there's something that's a high level that just sort of sits, and they're like the opportunists. So they're like, all right, guys, we're going to sit here and just kind of munch on our popcorn while the rest of these factions that we all did deals with achieve our agenda of destroying, being the hammer and sickle that destroys the West. And then they're going to fight over it. And we already have done the experiments. We already have the data. We know who's going to win that. We know already. You don't know. They don't know. Our tools, our orcs, they don't know, but we know because we've already done this. We already know. So we're going to just let this happen. They're going to fight it out. Strongest group wins. We've got some hidden punches that are going to come their way, and then we will gain our power. They did all the fighting. They did all the work. We groomed them. We laced their ideologies with our dogma. They didn't know it. They thought it was theirs. We wrote the whole thing. Go watch the episode on Unslaved, how the Vatican had a role in creating Islam to start with. Okay. And whatnot, and all these alliances I'm talking about. And then you can understand a little bit more about, I think, what's really going on. It's much bigger than just the surface level. Remember, we were told earlier you got to look past the surface level. Well, that's what we're trying to do. And then I came across this little bit, and this is just a 30-second clip of King Charles opening up an Islamic center in the UK. And when I watched it, I was like, wow, he's pretty switched on to this Islam thing. Very interested in it. And the more you deep dive into Charles' history, you're going to find out that he's been absolutely fascinated with Islam since the 70s. And he hired a private tutor to teach him Arabic specifically so that he could read the Quran and the Hadith and the surahs and all that. And he was absolutely obsessed with Islam for a long time. Now, why would that be? Who else was absolutely obsessed with Islam? We've read a lot of the conspiracy theories about the Windsors and their connections to Germany and their connections to the Nazis up the chain, just like the Bush family, which was installed in America. Knight of Malta, also family lineage with Nazi connections, or at least Nazi sympathies. So we're starting to see a picture form, and this is very relevant. And I've also done previous shows exposing Charles on the other front, that he's shaking hands with the Islamists with his deep fascination and just love for it. Also, you see Britain as a prime example of the effects of that. And you then also see him shaking hands with the left through the climate thing and the WEF. He started the WEF with Klaus Schwab. Okay. We know about the other things with the royal family, which they're trying to cover up and go, oh, I'm not part of that. Make Prince Andrew just give up all his land and titles, and that'll just take care of all the bad press that the royal family is getting. But I have a feeling that rabbit hole goes quite deep. So watch this clip, and then I got more.
Assalamu alaikum. In this milestone anniversary year, I can only say that it is with enormous pride and admiration that I join you all here today to pay tribute to this remarkable centre as it celebrates 4 decades of unfailing work to broaden our understanding of the Islamic world and in the United Kingdom.
And they love it. Yep. We all want to know about it. We're getting a grade A education, aren't we? Right now, getting a grade A education on a weaponized version of a religion coming in and being led in and being praised as it walks in by Western Templar Royal Vatican level elites that hail from what we would call the left-wing ideologies. And you wonder what the lineage of it all is and why it doesn't make any sense. And why would Westerners be inviting their doom? Why would they be letting people in that are literally saying, we're going to destroy your culture and take it over by 3 means? We're going to outbreed you. We're allowed to lie in order to bring the object of our order into power. We're going to get into the political houses and the courts, just like the Illuminati did, because they've studied it too. And we're going to take you over from within without firing a shot. And one day you're just going to wake up and you're all under our Sharia law. Or on the communist side of it, well, what? You're going to wake up one day and you're all going to be singing Kumbaya while ceding your land and territory and working yourselves to death because nobody wants to work anymore. And we're going to force you to become farmers until you don't want to do it anymore, until you're too starved to keep working. And then it all just goes downhill from there, or whatever version you want. This is not an attack on races of people or groups of people. This is an attack on bad human ideas coming to fruition over a long period of time, highly financed and steered into place by unknown people that don't see the same thing you do, don't see the world the same way you do, don't live like you, have nothing to do with you. Breakaway civilization. And you just start looking at the actions of these people and you go, oh, right, historic The British Empire, the king, I thought we were about no kings. Oh, but this king we're good with, right? Knighting an Islamo-communist. And now you got the guy Mondami in New York who's about to be, quote, knighted into the mayor's office to bring in Islamo-communism, a very particular brand honed over hundreds of years. So yeah, there's an occult level to what's happening that most of us are not aware of. You've been living in a dream world, not the real world. False allegiances. Oh, and meanwhile, what's the Pope doing? What's Christianity up to? Oh, he's over there blessing a big giant ice cube in the name of stopping climate change. With a bunch of hippie women singing a bunch of John Lennon bullshit in the background. Left wing, red papacy. It's a red papacy. It's not the papacy of old. It's the red papacy. Reds, what do you think I'm talking about? Totalitarians wearing costumes and doing rituals and magic tricks on the stage. When I saw this, I'm like, you got to be absolutely embarrassed by this. The true Catholics that mean well, the true Christians that mean well, you've got to investigate what's been growing in your own corridors. The Masons that mean well, you got to investigate what's been growing in your own corridors of power, in your own lodges. The Islamic peoples, the Arabic peoples, you've got to investigate your own evil. The Western peoples, the right, the left, the inside, the up, down, left, right, center, you got to investigate the origins. It's occulted. The premise, the start point is human consciousness. There's a flaw. There's something wrong. It comes from trauma. Past trauma, present trauma. Someone knows how to pull that rug. There you go. Speaking of which, I got a couple minutes of this brilliant video that someone sent me this morning. I haven't even watched the whole thing. I just wanted to play the first 3 or 4 minutes of it. It's called How They Broke Us All. And this is now, in my opinion, really good to look at because this gentleman, I've only recently come across him. I'm just seeing this for the first time. I still have to dig more. But what he's saying here is I was going to do slides on this, but he did a better job of summarizing it in his little video. We're going to watch a few minutes. He's calling it How They Broke Us All with Psychological Warfare. Okay, so now he's going to describe the methodology by how they've achieved this divide and conquer. So let's watch this real quick, and then we'll come back. This is getting into Tavistock Institute. Here we go.
If you've had that feeling like your life doesn't belong to you, something is off, maybe the choices, the emotions, even the arguments in your head aren't really yours, that is not you being paranoid at all. That is the program running. And the crazy part about all of this is it didn't start with your phone. It didn't start with TikTok. It started well over 100 years ago in a quiet office with men in suits mapping out the human mind like a machine that they could rewire. But here's what almost nobody understands. There is a reason that outrage feels addictive. There's a reason that despair feels normal. There's a reason that you wake up with dread and blame yourself for it. It was designed. And the moment you see how, you can't unsee it. So let me rip this open for you. Where did all of this programming really begin? It was a quiet office in London in 1921. This is the Tavistock Institute. They said it was about helping soldiers heal, and it wasn't. And once they cracked all of these things open that they did there, the experiment never ended. Officially, Tavistock was about treating shell shock. This is what they used to call PTSD. It was trauma therapy. It was a beautiful cover story. But what they actually found, trauma doesn't just break people, it softens them up, makes them pliable. They were not fixing soldiers like they told everybody. They were testing civilians. They were running war psychology on entire populations. Grief, confusion, and fear. Tavistock used all of these things like tools in a toolbox. Once you know which lever makes a herd turn into a stampede, you don't need speeches or ballots anymore. You just pull the lever. So after World War II, Tavistock moves into media and education and government. Its fingerprints are on NATO, PSYOPs, Cold War propaganda, and the actual birth of mass advertising.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to go through the whole thing. It's like a 12-minute video. I can post a link for you, but just the first two little chapters he did there on what happened with this Tavistock Institute and how it maybe even started out as a way to deal with post-traumatic stress, but it very quickly morphed into a way of developing psychological warfare on not just some enemy combatants, on the population of Britain and now America. And here we go. And that's because I believe agents from these higher orders got their way in, captured it, and then used its resources towards their own agenda. And look where we are today. And he's right. It didn't start with TikTok. It didn't start in the modern internet age with social media. This is over 100 years old. It goes back to print, magazine, books, radio, the weapons of propaganda. And then you're going to get into Edward Bernays, and we kind of already know where that goes, right? So they know how to breed and induce mass formation psychosis around anything they want. And they know that trauma is the way to do it. And they know emotional arguments are the keys to your heart and your mind. And they know that they can, if they keep you in a traumatic fight or flight response system, they can then put the other layer in place, which is that's the rhetoric. That's the, hey, brotherhood, we're coming together, equality, equity, listen to us. And then you're like, okay, sign here. Oh, I got to sign in blood. Right. Oh, and I don't have any freedom. And it just goes downhill, but it was too late for you to figure it out. It's the biggest con ever. And so that plays a part, is that this became a system of not just some old guys talking about occult knowledge and how they could take power. It became a system of how to repeatedly take power by way of understanding human psychology and how to manipulate it through trauma. It works in the Eastern world. It works in the Western world. It works in ancient times. It works in modern times. It works in future times. Because everywhere we go, there we are. And there they are, those that want to use this little loophole in the human mind towards their advantage. And what if I told you you could figure this out for yourself and actually use this loophole for your own favor and as a way of guarding against their black magic? So very interesting. And then just a quick comment about all the no kings stuff, that I couldn't believe my eyes when I heard that slogan, because that's the slogan of the French Revolution, by the way. And I was even watching some protesters, or the people with microphones interviewing protesters at the No Kings protest. First of all, I'm still waiting for somebody that can coherently give their argument as to why they're there doing the protest. Most of them can't. We found out there's a bunch of paid agents that are on the ground. We found out we've got Soros organizations and others that are funding it. Like the receipts are starting to come out right now. I'll hold on that conclusively until I see all the evidence, but this is what the indications are. And I hear some of these people saying, this is just like the French Revolution when we took down all those elites. They're saying that. And they have no idea what they're talking about. And then I see this shit coming to Canada. They had protests, a No Kings protest in Canada. And I'm like, well, we are dealing with people that are not really friendly to the facts of reality. So this is why it makes sense that this massive contradiction is allowed to show its face. But I mean, guys, here's the No Kings Canada edition.
I, Mark Carney, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty, King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors.
Do we need to run it again just to make sure?
I, Mark Carney, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty, King Charles III, King of Canada, his heirs and successors.
His heirs and his successors, the King of Canada. There's your WEF globalists, Chatham House, King's horsemen running your country. Oh, but the king is just our decoration. It's just tradition. Is it? Do you really believe that? Really? Next. Yeah, that's where I put the tweet. I'm like, okay, now this is where I'm going to flesh this out. This is just a little tangent. We're going to go on here to just keep fleshing this out and proving it. I was on X and people were coming at me about how the Nazis weren't socialists. This happened as a huge thing on Canadian X. Okay, it was like 3 days ago, and it was because Pierre Poilievre, our disgraced conservative leader, or disgraced in the public eye anyways, who is making a comeback. He finally got a seat back in Parliament, and he started to come out a little rougher this time. He's starting to be like, I'm just going to not play it so safe because that didn't really work last time. And he's just starting to say shit. He's just doing X posts. And he posts, I should have had the actual post, but he was bringing up a lot of actually similar points to myself, showing the different brands of socialism. And he's like, Bolshevik socialism, Nazi socialism is a socialist party. And he's bringing these points. Well, the left in Canada went berserko and started it was my whole feed all day. It was just full of like MPs and different groups and different Canadian celebrities, if such a thing exists, that were talking about how there's no such thing as Nazi socialism, and there weren't socialists and because Canadians are socialists. Okay. Let's just that's through and through part of our heritage. And most of the Canadians don't look at the research I'm talking to you about. And Canadians here have never experienced what happens when full-blown socialism goes into effect. And I'm always encouraging those people that I come across to, go and visit actual countries where socialism is put into full effect, because you guys keep fighting for it to be brought in more and more into Canada. If it isn't already, I'm already taxed up to 60-70%. I can barely, it's ridiculous. So just keeping that in context for why we're going to go through this. And I just went, all right, you guys are all out there trying to say, you guys are so stupid for saying that the Nazis were socialists. It's just so dumb. Is it now? Is it? Let's go check in with the actual Nazis on that one, bud. So that was my tweet. I put it like this, quote, "The Nazis weren't socialists. That's just ridiculous." Canadian liberals right now all over X. So I'm just like, okay, well, let's check in with the actual Nazis. Here's the first one. The source is a speech on May the 1st, 1927 in Munich, recorded Adolf Hitler, Speeches and Proclamations, 1932 to 1945 by Max Doremus. And this is the actual, I'm giving you like as much details on the source so you guys don't go, well, that's a fake quote. That was actually attributed to Churchill or something. It's like, no. Here we go. And this is what he said. Okay. The Nazis aren't socialists, guys. No, he didn't say that. He said this: "We are socialists." That's the first sentence. We are socialists. We are enemies of today's capitalistic economic system for the exploitation of the economically weak. And we are determined to destroy this system under all conditions. Oh, that's not enough. We will continue. Here's Joseph Goebbels. We are the socialists because we see in socialism the only possibility of assuring the nation's future. Socialism is the doctrine of liberation for the working class. Here's a source. What about Gregor Strauser? The slogan of National Socialism is the common goods before the individual goods. That is socialism in the truest sense. He's right, guys. I've been saying this the whole time, haven't I? Isn't that what the Illuminati said? That's the speech, 1930. Hermann Göring. Why nationalize industry when you can nationalize people? Our socialism is the socialism of the German race. They just went into the racial thing a little bit. They're nothing different. Same premise. Now, here's one from Hitler. And I put as many damn sources as possible on this one. Though superfluous, it may here once again be emphasized that we National Socialists, there's that word again, in fighting this world peril as mercilessly as we did from the beginning hour of our political activity up to the present, have not defended anti-socialist or even pro-capitalist interests. Our struggle against Bolshevism, meaning Russian communism, is no fight against, but in favor of socialism. Our attitude grew out of a deep conviction that a true and genuine socialism can only be realized if its lowest and most ill-born offspring, Jewish Bolshevism, would have been done away with. So they just didn't like the particular brand of it. The fight against Bolshevism can only be carried through to a successful issue by a people that has found a new structure for its folk life, which is adequate to the dynamic values and standards of the 20th century, a socialist structure in national form. They're not socialist, are they? Here's the term. I'm going to butcher this, but it's the National Socialist Deutsche Arbeiterspartei, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. This is from Adolf Hitler. Each activity and each need of the individual will thereby be regulated by the party. Lots of freedom going on in that. As the representative of the general good. There will be no license, no free space in which the individual belongs to himself. So they despise the individual just like the rest of you totalist assholes. This is socialism, he says, not such trifles as the private possession of the means of production. See, they just thought they were more sophisticated. Of what importance is it that if I range men firmly within a discipline, they cannot escape? Let them own land or factories as much as they please. The decisive factor is the state, through the party, is supreme over them, regardless whether they are owners or workers. All that, you see, is unessential. Our socialism goes far deeper. And this is Adolf Hitler from Hitler's Table Talk, 1941 and 1944, a collection of private conversations recorded by Heinrich Heim and Henry Picker, later translated and published in English by Hugh Trevor Roper in 1953. Okay, so there's the source. What he's saying is, our socialism is better than your socialism. Na boo boo. We found a way to blind the masses far superior to you guys. What they saw as primitive, and of course there was the Jewish anti-Semitism aspect of it, and also there's even a deeper layer to that whole story of what really started Bolshevism. It wasn't just a handful of Jews. You guys are reading surface history. There were Jews involved. We can figure out why. There's that same poison pill can affect anybody, but there's way bigger powers, as I've been pointing out. Okay? This is all something that was cooked up well in advance. And then there were the brands, and then each brand thought they were superior to the other. It's literally no more complicated than that. But for all these liberals on X to go out and be like, well, they weren't socialists. That's because those are socialists trying to say we aren't socialists, just like the abusers, the abusers and the psychic vampires and the manipulators in your life will walk up and punch you right in the face and go, I'm not violent. You're like, well, you just use violence against me. But that's not violence. Actually, you calling me violent is violence. So this is manipulation, narcissism to a whole other level, editing reality, right? To prop up a lie. Nazism was perfected socialism. perfected. That's how they looked at it. They just were staring down their nose at their competitor. That's all. Same territory. That's what we got to get. Now, look at this. So this is Dinesh D'Souza reposted this, and it was more interesting because it's this Myron Gaines character, which I see flying around on the manosphere about some big guy with big balls and whatever, who's out there taking on the feminists. And you find out, well, the guy changed his name. He came into the West, and did he change his allegiances? I don't know, because Dinesh is just saying here, I note with some dismay that I cannot easily tell if this guy is part of the Ilhan Mamdani gang on the left or the Tucker Candace gang on the right. It's like Orwell says in Animal Farm, in the end, the pigs and the humans are indistinguishable. And then I've got the quote where George Orwell is saying, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Or the other one where he said, the creatures outside looked from pig to man and from man to pig and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which. So we're talking about this woke right, woke left, and all these influencers. Well, this is right from this dude like a couple weeks ago. Yeah, we like Hitler. No one gives a fuck what you woke Jews think anymore. Bro was a revolutionary leader and saved Germany. The Jews declared war on Germany first. Where did they learn this from? The Middle Easterners. Where did they learn it from? That's a question. If we're just asking questions. Now, this account called Crackpot History, they just did a nice little summary also to point something out here, which a lot of the woke righties like to try to point out and try to make it all look really like they try to cleanse it and like airbrush all the ugliness out of it and make it look like there was no role of like the way the Nazis they were going after. I can't remember what their argument was, but they just do a summary here that is sort of unknown. That you got to remember that they might come in with the veneer again of being part of a country or being part of a religion, right? But remember, they're secret handshaking assholes behind the scenes, and they have secret allegiances. So they'll come out and be like the Pope. I'm a Christian. I love Christian values, and then he's doing a bunch of woke shit, right? Or satanic rituals, and it's the same here. Oh, Hitler was a Catholic. He was sponsored by the Vatican. He had emissaries coming in from the Vatican. Yeah, but then when he installed his dictatorship, he's trying to erase all the religions, including Christianity, to replace it with what? The religion of the state, the religion of the Illuminists. Not the good Illuminists, the evil ones that stole the name and the whole thing. And here's the breakdown of what happened that people don't know about. The amount of Hitler and Nazi apologia is never ending on here. He's talking about X. So let's talk briefly about a few lesser known World War II Holocaust facts. Number one, Auschwitz's Block 17 was used to hold hundreds of Catholic, mostly Polish clergy. Over 450 were imprisoned there, and around 150 were murdered. Two, Dachau, one of the concentration camps, became one of the largest sites of persecution of Christian clergy in history. Blocks 26, 28, and 30 held over 2,700 priests, more than 1,000 of which were murdered. Because they went after the Poles as well, right? Around 1.8 million Catholic civilians were killed in Poland during World War II. Thousands of Protestant clergy were imprisoned for refusing to swear loyalty to Hitler. So he didn't care Catholic or Protestant. He's like, I am the Führer now. Number five, the Nazis shuttered Catholic youth and learning groups and replaced them with the Hitler Youth. In Poland, the Catholic Church was systematically dismantled, with nearly 80% of the clergy being imprisoned. Church lands were confiscated. Well, what about all that free property you got over there in Nazi Germany? They're confiscating the lands of the churches, guys, and the buildings looted and destroyed. They're also burning churches down all over Canada right now. Did you notice? And Europe. Maria Restituta Kafka, an Austrian Catholic nurse and nun, refused to remove crucifixes from hospital rooms under Nazi orders. She was arrested by the Gestapo and beheaded by guillotine in Vienna in 1943. There are many more such examples. So when all these defenders of Christianity demonstrate their idolization of Hitler and the Nazis, they're conveniently leaving out the fact that the Nazis were among the biggest persecutors of Christian belief in Europe during the 20th century. It's either willful blindness or ignorance. And the reason, guys, is because, again, They only wear the costumes. Even from Islam, they're not really part of your cloth. Those imams, those Iranian dictators, or whoever you're going to talk about. They are part of a ancient brotherhood, mystical occult, with the revolutionary fire. They're converts, they're ideologues, and they get in and then they remove what they were allegedly fighting for and replace it with the religion of power, the state. The state controls. It's happened so many times. All right, quick little rabbit hole here. You get into the history of Hitler and his upbringing and where he came from, and some of the people behind the original Nazi socialist parties and all these types, or the original socialist workers' parties and all whatnot. And you'll find the guys in Austria, because remember, Hitler was Austrian. Okay, so you got Karl Lueger, Austrian politician. Here's an interesting little backdrop from Britannica. So it's just surface layer, but it's good enough. Karl Lueger, born 1844, Vienna, Austria, died March 1910, was a politician, co-founder, and leader of the Austrian Christian Socialist Party, and mayor of Vienna, who transformed the Austrian capital into a modern city. Lueger, from a working-class family, studied law at the University of Vienna. Elected to the capital's municipal council as a liberal in 1875, he's started on the liberals, he soon became popular for his exposure of corruption. Lueger did not hesitate to exploit the prevalent anti-Semitic and nationalistic currents in Vienna for his own demagogic purposes. He supported politicians who actively perpetrated the myth of blood libel and frequently inveighed against an alleged Jewish influence on academia and the press. Though Lueger's personal beliefs remained a matter of scholarly debate until after his death, he provided the virulent anti-Semitism of extremists such as George Ritter, Knight von Schroeder, who was a knight, with a patina of mainstream respectability. Lueger had his largest following among artisans and lower middle class. Lueger was elected to the Austrian Reichstag parliament in 1885, and in 1889 was one of the founders of the Christian Social Party, remaining one of the party's most effective leaders until his death. All right, how's that relevant? Let's go forward. Lueger was a champion of universal male suffrage, which was introduced in Austria in January 1907. The Christian Social Party's platform of federation to solve the empire's nationalities problem was also decisively influenced by him. Throughout the 20th century, historians largely dismissed Lueger's anti-Semitism as a matter of political expediency and as a reflection of the age. Adolf Hitler enters the scene, who had moved to Vienna in 1908 and had witnessed Lueger at the apex of his power. Hitler praised Lueger's charisma and popular appeal in Mein Kampf and elsewhere. And you can go read it for yourselves, guys. Although Hitler's own brand of anti-Semitism adhered more closely to the racist demagoguery of Schroner and Julius Streicher. The events of the Anschluss, World War II, and the Holocaust did not lead to an immediate reprisal of Lueger and his influence, but by the early 21st century, Vienna had begun to distance itself from his legacy. In 2012, in a move that was strongly opposed by members of the far-right Freedom Party, a section of the Ringstrasse, the city's central boulevard, that had borne Lueger's name since 1934, was renamed University Ring. This little backdrop about some of the influencers on Hitler. So then we go, okay, who's this Schroner guy? Well, he was 1842 to 1921. He was an Austrian political extremist, founder of the Pan-German Party. Remember that's interesting, Pan-German, Pan-Turkic, Pan-Arabic. Get into the history of the young movements in the Middle East and in Europe. He was a virulent anti-Semite and was perhaps the best-known spokesperson for popular anti-democratic sentiments in the late Empire. He was a left-wing liberal when first elected to the federal parliament in 1873. Schroner gradually developed what was to be his characteristic Prussiophile anti-Semitic position. He eventually acquired a strong personal following, especially among the Viennese lower middle class and fraternities. His Pan-German party languished after his imprisonment for an assault on a newspaper office in 1888, but quickly revived following his re-election to Parliament in 1897. And he goes on and on and on. As a national figure, he reached the peak of his influence in 1901 when 21 Pan-Germans were returned to the Reichstag, the parliament. His violent temperament, because they believe in violence, however, so disrupted the party that by 1907, it had all but disappeared from Austrian parliamentary politics. This did not diminish his long-lasting ideological influence. Consequently, one of his most ardent followers was the young Adolf Hitler. Now, the Christian Social Party. A little bit on them. Christian Social Party, Austrian Catholic political party, founded by Karl Lueger in 1883, along ideological lines elaborated by Karl von Wolfgang. It achieved the distinction of being the first political party anywhere to attain power on the issue of anti-Semitism, winning 66% of the seats on the Vienna City Council in 1895. See anti-Semitic parties and organizations. Christian Social Party propaganda was conducted in the scurrilous anti-Jewish style popularized in Vienna by Abraham Sancta Clara and was developed by Quirin Endlich, Sebastian Brunner, and Joseph Deckert. Joseph Deckert, you guys should go look into that guy. Its program was made topically relevant by identifying big business and chain stores with Jews. So it's not just about the Jews. There's an attack on the aristocracy and on big business, or in other words, free market capitalism. The lower ranks of the clergy supplied the ideological backbone of the party. In character with its archaic tendencies, the party at the end of the 19th century revived the blood libel, especially pressed by Ernst Schneider. On the other hand, at its founding, it was opposed by the episcopate, not least because of its vulgar anti-Semitism. Now listen to this. In 1895, however, Pope Leo the 13th rejected protests by the bishops, thus giving the party Vatican approval. So the Vatican being like, yeah, down with the Jews. Eventually, it gained ground over the veteran Austrian Catholic Conservative Party, some of whose main leaders joined the Christian Social Party, until the two amalgamated in 1907. So they captured both left and right, guys. Subsequently, the Christian Social Catholic brand prevailed over the Schroner's racial anti-Semitism, and hence a number of apostates such as Julius Porzer and Max Anton Lowe could figure henceforth among its leaders. So just a little history of this lovely Christian Social Party. And we're seeing the tenets of that party and that Vatican stance coming to life right now all over social media on what we call the woke right. Just to nail this home, because everybody likes to say, well, our religion and our tribe didn't do any of the dark social stuff. This is all on the left. It's all with the Jews. It's all with this group. It's all with that group. And I'm like, no, you're all fucked. You're all part of it. You're all poisoned by it, because everywhere we go, there we are, right? So you got Christian socialism. Here's a quick synopsis. Christian socialism is a religious and political philosophy that blends Christianity and socialism, endorsing socialist economics. Not just theology, guys. These guys are very practical. Socialist economics on the basis of the Bible and the teachings of Jesus. These guys believe Jesus was a socialist. Many Christian socialists believe capitalism to be idolatrous and rooted in the sin of greed. Christian socialists identify the cause of social inequality to be the greed that they associate with capitalism. Islamic socialism, is it any different? Islamic socialism is a political philosophy that incorporates elements of Islam into a system of socialism. As a term, it was coined by various left-wing Muslim leaders to describe a more spiritual form of socialism. So this would be like your Mandami groups, right? Islamic societies believe that the teachings of the Quran and Hadith, citing aspects of their religion like zakat, are not only compatible with principles of socialism, but, wait for it, also are very supportive of them. So we're finding the common roots here that allowed for these alliances to even take place. The roots are found in the very premises of the religious orders themselves. Then you got the Jewish left. The Jewish left refers to Jewish individuals or organizations that identify with or support left-wing or social liberal causes consciously as Jews. So we got a huge left-wing socialist communist faction in Israel, in America. There's always been supporters from all of these Abrahamic faiths and the Eastern faiths. It's been a problem for all of humanity. That's the whole point of this, okay? Jews have been major forces in the history of the labor movement, the settlement house movement, the women's rights movement, anti-racist and anti-colonialist work, and anti-fascist and anti-capitalist organizations of many forms in Europe, the United States, and many other European and Middle Eastern countries, including the state of Israel. So the Jews also have a massive problem in their midst with what's known as the Jewish left. But don't forget, some of the greatest exposures of this fact were right-wing Jews. Right? You got Ayn Rand, you got Milton Friedman, we could keep going with all the Jews that were blowing the whistle on this and trying to wake up their own people. And sadly, they never got heard. So, and it's the same in Christianity. You had other Christian writers going, no, it's not based on socialism. It's not based on this. And you've even had maybe a few apostates come out of Islam trying to fight against it. Most of them have probably been killed. Just saying. And you're like, well, Dave, you're talking about socialism. So of course, it's socialism. Like, it just means you're just trying to take care of the little guy. Well, as we've been proving this entire time, no, it is not. That is just simply the cover story for the revolutionary faith that came out of the secret societies. We've also got the same thing with communism. Christian communism is a theological view that the teachings of Jesus compel Christians to support religious communism. Although there is no universal agreement on the exact dates when communistic ideas and practices in Christianity began. You should go see our series on the Dead Sea Scrolls on Unslaved. You'll find out where it began. Many Christian communists argue that evidence from the Bible suggests that the first Christians, including the apostles in the New Testament, established their own small communist society in the years following Jesus' death and resurrection. They might be hinting at the little communist sect in Qumran that was described in detail in the Dead Sea Scrolls and practiced communism. Then you got the same thing in Islamic communism, which refers to a political ideology that combines elements of communism with Islamic principles. It seeks to address social justice and economic equality within an Islamic framework. That's why we call it Islamo-communism, often drawing on the teachings of the Quran to support its goals. So they just go right to the books and they go, guys, it's all right here. Hebrew communists. The Hebrew communists, I can't pronounce that, were a short-lived political party in mandatory Palestine and Israel. And there's a whole bunch of these groups in the Jewish world as well. Okay. It doesn't make up Judaism though. Okay. There's so much in classical Judaism that refutes communist ideas. Okay. But because the Jews were so cosmopolitan in the way that because they were basically incubated in all the civilizations, like they lived through all of it. You got wild debates going on in the world of Judaism. And there's so many different ways of seeing it, and groups and debates and arguments and different sects and whatnot. And would you be surprised to find that's the same in Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or Hinduism? Like, how many gods does Hinduism have? I think it's like thousands, right? So there's as many. And that's why we always understand that, like I said, this kind of proves the point about what I was saying about how nature functions. See, I believe nature was the prime source field that we got all the religious ideas from. And then it kind of went from there. But just like I was saying, when we learned the lessons from nature originally and then wrote them into screenplays and called that religion, we were looking at nature in a traumatic way, right? Because there were probably massive cataclysms and natural events that caused us to not trust nature and come up with the idea that the gods are vengeful and all this stuff, right? And then when we started observing nature, you had two classes. You had one group that you could call the more Gnostic groups. If we go back to like Egypt, this would be your Atonists, who look at the world, the earth, nature, as itself some sort of illusion or fallen evil thing. Like we're in a cage or a prison, like we are in hell right now. And that the body is tempting you and deceiving you because of the fact that it's born from nature. So it's an ideology that the premise rejects nature, rejects the world, and rejects the body. Then you had the ominist, the shamanic, the more druidic, the more natural philosophy, the more, I guess, mystical naturalism, which was born out of the Hermetic groups that analyzed nature and went, no, when you look at the tree, you're not seeing collectivism. You're not seeing an illusion. In fact, the illusion, this is where you'd bring in someone like an Alvin Boyd Kuhn who would translate this for you. He would say, the illusion or the Maya is not found in the natural forms. The illusion in the Maya is coming from the mind that's perceiving those forms. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Like, that's the argument, right? And when we know about the traumatized psyche argument, that is the root cause of all the totalism. And then where does the desire in human beings, regardless of their stripes or creeds or races or groups, where does it even come from? It comes from the desire to control. Why would you want to control, and what would you want to control? Well, you want to control nature. You want to control physical nature. You want to control human nature. You want to control the animal kingdom. You want to compartmentalize it all and organize it and fix it. That's where the Illuminist ideology and the Gnostic ideology comes in. We're going to fix the broken Matrix video game. And we're going to force the square peg into a round hole. Whereas the other side, the more ominous Hermetic school, would say, no, man, nature's perfection. You are birthed from that perfection. In fact, if you actually spent some time getting out of victim consciousness for 2 minutes, and you actually went and zoomed in on that tree and saw the myriad of thousands of little differences between all the other trees, you're going to see the perfection. And you're going to see that the illusion you keep bitching about and crafting entire cults about and have all these world power designs for, to try to get power because you didn't empower yourself from within. You didn't perceive nature in its natural order correctly. That was given to you by the gods or God, or however you want to look at it. If you studied it correctly, you would realize you are in a wonderful orchestra of what is it? It's an intricate, implicate order, right? It's alive. It's conscious. It's as conscious as you are, if not more. It's all conscious. And to see the one in the many, to see the smallest and the biggest and the biggest and the smallest, to see the fractals, to see the Fibonacci, all the Fibonacci stuff, that's Hermeticism. That's not Gnosticism. That's, wow, the pine cone always has that number 8 in it. The butterfly wings always have the number 4 in it. It's the perfect golden meme ratio. That's also coming out of this lost archive of occult knowledge. The positive schools, the natural schools, that all they were doing goes, well, hey, human, I know you feel a little lost in the woods here, but if you actually study the woods, you'll realize you're never lost in the woods. You're never lost in the woods. Whereas the cultists and the religious go, you're always lost in the woods, and the woods are trying to get you. They live in fear. And they believe in violence as a way of solving that. They believe in destruction as a way of solving that, not creation. They lose empathy because the fear takes over and dominates the empathy. And that they lose the empathy with themselves. You start to feel like you're guilty. Guilt, one of the most powerful weapons ever constructed by our minds to self-control us and also to be used as a weapon to control others. If you're in a relationship with people in your life that use guilt as a weapon to manipulate you and persuade you and control you, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you've been living and observing the way the government is behaving towards its citizens right now, you'll know what I'm talking about. Well, guilt. How dare you? How dare you? Right? All these things have an origin. They come from somewhere. Every single symbol of your religion comes from somewhere that has nothing to do with your religion. Do you know that? All the keys of Solomon, all the pine cones at the Vatican, all the bulls with horns, all the stars of David's with different pyramids facing different directions, all the stained glass windows, all the saints with the halos. This is all coming from the original roots of religion, which was the stellar tradition. And that tradition was largely hermetic in its roots. It looked at it as a wonderful mystery, a beautiful mystery that also had some terror in it. But there was a reason for that terror. There wasn't a condemnation of it. When you study some of these dark sects, even within Buddhism, and even in India, some of those cults, they do so much defiling of the body, the whipping the priests would do to themselves, scarring up their backs as they're doing their confessions, right? There's an origin to this. And then when that shit starts to happen, they do that to other people. They punish the sinners. They boil them, and they whip them and hang them. They cut off their heads in the Islamic world, right? Like that comes from somewhere. It comes from trauma. It comes from believing that the illusion is in the actual forms and not within the human mind perceiving the forms. Because if you know the illusion and the distortion is in the mind and the eyes perceiving the thing, you actually have the solution to the problem right there, because you can change your mind. You can change your perspective by an act of applying your will and your reason. That's the original knowledge. That got converted into the other form that's like, you're in a fallen, cursed world, and you're in a fallen, cursed body that's a product of that fallen, cursed world, and it's trying to lure you away from the spiritual dimensions that we keep harping about, when they'll never tell you that before that idea of the separation between the natural and the spiritual happened, it used to be looked at as one. Which ideology, which premise would produce a much more beautiful, freer, united world in an organic way? Which would promote an individual versus a collective cult? The premise of fallen world, fallen body, illusion emanating from the reality, or not fallen, blank slate, perfected nature expressed in the human being, Leonardo da Vinci, right? Adam Kadmon, the phi ratio. We see the code. We realize the illusion was in our minds the whole time, and that we can route that illusion out, and that illusion is born of trauma and fear. And then we have to have the warrior tradition come in and teach you how to deal with trauma and fear, psychologically, I mean. And then let's just go through back to the totalitarians and the recent experiments we've been talking about. Which premise of philosophy produced political ideas that were then put into practice in the economies and in the countries and in the nations? And which one produced more freedom, more abundance, more unity versus those that produce less freedom, more poverty, more genocide, more of the most evil things you can ever read about if you'd actually read about it? Which one? The fallen world or the natural world? It's just something to think about. And that is the debate within the secret society tradition. But the public isn't warned. The profane are not a part of that debate. You're just witnessing them, the adults in the room, have the debate live and then do more experiments. And one side was winning out for the longest time. And only recently do we have a glimmer of resistance start to show itself. And that resistance starts with getting back to the base principles and exposing the lies, exposing this. Truth wins. Opinions don't matter. My thoughts on the subject don't matter. What's the truth? Right? So, super deep dive. I just gave you the entire backdrop for what we've been investigating on Slate. It's just taken us years and segues to try to roll it all out, and we're not even done. It's a huge story to unpack. It's huge. It's huge. I got a couple more here, guys, and I'm going to let you go. Now, here's another remnant of the old mystery school tradition that might have its own new name, meritocracy, the merit principle, but it's something that is despised by the tyrants, the cult leaders, the dictators. They despise this. This is always the number one thing on the chopping block, whether you're talking a cult or whether you're talking a political cult. Always the number one thing to go is the idea of merit, because the way the old sages used to look at this was that if we install an ideology of merit, that will help lead the human towards morality and virtue, because he doesn't just have to think about it and then his mind runs around and his imagination gets mixed up, and we've identified the culprit of the illusion that produces bad dogma as being born from the psyche, from the trauma. So what do we got to do? We got to deal with the trauma like a bunch of, imagine like you're, we're the doctors of your conscience. We're going to help fix and repair the damage that was done to the human psyche after wave and wave and wave of cataclysmic shock to the human mind over history, right? So we got to repair that. That was the original job of shamans and priesthoods. They had a noble job, right? They were the moon stars, the ministers, trying to connect you back to the stars and the stars within. That was what they were pastors, astors, teachers of the stars. You can keep going. Like, it's all there in the language and the symbolism. And their original job was to repair the damaged psyche so that man could return to the natural view of self and the world, and then heal the world. Do you do the direct approach? Do you do the re-education, forced totalitarian approach to force this to happen? Or do you do the Mr. Miyagi approach, the more indirect, let the pupil learn by sending them off on these adventures and give them some cues here and there to help them learn by themselves? There's nothing better than learning something yourself rather than just memorizing something and repeating it back to somebody. I'm learning this as I teach my martial arts course right now. The way I teach it is much different than I used to. And I'm seeing the positive effect of doing that. And I've aligned it with this, and it's magic what's happening. It proves that there's an understanding of the motivations and the drives of the human being. And that if we're dealing with people stuck in traumatic thinking, that immediately puts them into victim consciousness. Then you have the predators that come in and go, we'll save you from the bad guys. And then they become the bad guys. The Mr. Miyagi approach of the more sage group, the servants of truth, I would say, the people that really cared about this earth and humanity and peace and freedom and all the things we say that we want, is that they said, well, we're going to do the indirect, we're going to say, how about we give you the ideas that if you put the work in, not somebody doing it for you, not some priest telling you, not some politician or king doing it for you, you directly. And then we get rid of the intermediaries, all these vicars and popes and friggin' black robes and cultists as the intermediary between you and the divine experience. We'll get rid of that and we'll let you go direct. But here's the thing. You're going to sacrifice some of your time and energy, and it's going to be hard work. But we'll determine the structure by your ability to earn that way. And that's merit. And it will be direct to you. It will be like, if you do the work, you will reap the reward. It'll be a simple calculation, no confusion, no need for totalitarianism, one-to-one, based on the individual. The world rejected it. That's the sad tale. It's not just a bunch of dukes and Illuminati guys and wicked priests. Don't forget, they're also us too. So, this is something that humanity rejected, and they rejected it because they couldn't defeat the trauma in their mind, and on a whole, en masse. The public mind couldn't get over it. Continued to create trauma in the world just because we project psychologically, and that's all we knew. So that's a program. And then they told you it's deterministic. You don't have free will. You don't have control of your consciousness. That ideology is a product of a traumatized psyche that would prefer you to believe that's a preference. That's the illusion of the Maya in the mind, that you don't have the free will to make this change. So because you're deterministic, here's the priesthoods, here's the kings and queens, Here's the holy imams. Here's all the rulers. There you go. The other factions in these societies went, no, buddy, that's not the original. You guys are lying. The original is to tell people the truth, which is that the illusion is not in the natural forms. It's in the psyche, and that can be healed. Like a wound on your body can be healed. Like an injury that takes you maybe 6 months to a year to recover from can be healed. But guess what? If you get that injury and you don't do the grueling, painstaking work it's going to be to recover from that injury, all the personal training and the exercises and every day of the week, you got to be working to rebuild that limb. If you do the work, merit will show you the way and you will earn the recovery of that traumatized limb. It's the same with your psyche. So this isn't a prescription that was sold very highly in the human world because everybody wants an easy lunch. They don't want to do the work. They're terrified to look within because they're traumatized. And so it's easy to project the trauma and then go and burn down the whole city, right? And that's what's happened. So let me give you the tenets of meritocracy, and then I'll leave you as a listener to decide which way, Western man, or let's just put it like this, which way, human man or woman, which way should we go? Which way should we go? Should we go towards totalism or should we head towards this? Pro-meritocracy stance. This is just a summary of the arguments, okay? Meritocracy is a system where individuals advance based on their abilities, efforts, and achievements rather than factors like background, identity, or enforced quotas. Proponents argue that it fosters innovation, efficiency, and overall societal progress by rewarding talent and hard work, creating incentives for personal improvement and excellence. For instance, meritocracy acts as a social elevator that enables upward mobility for people from disadvantaged backgrounds through education and skill development, rather than leg up and free lunch, as seen in stories of individuals rising from poverty to professional success, of which I could regale you for hours, my friends. It enhances the collective talent pool by placing competent people, that's a key word, in roles where they can contribute most effectively, leading to breakthroughs in technology, defense, and economy. In contrast to hereditary systems or equity-driven approaches, meritocracy democratizes opportunities by evaluating based on demonstrated competence, promoting healthy competition, and discipline without overriding individual freedoms or business rights. Do you see the little bonus at the end there? The prescription of this, which again isn't just something new, it's an ancient ideology. The difference is you get to have your cake and eat it too here because you didn't lose your freedoms or rights in the process. Whereas the other one is telling you, oh, it's a mandatory thing. You got to give all that up in order to have the utopia. Lies. Historically, merit-based systems have driven prosperity in market economies like the US, where rewards for ideas, example via patents, fuel growth, unlike centrally planned models that stifle ambition. Centrally planned models, that's your totalitarianism, my friends. Overall, meritocracy is seen as essential for avoiding mediocrity, which is the enemy of success, optimizing resources. Isn't that what the left wants? Isn't that what all these totalists want? And achieving the common good through individual excellence. So you actually have a population pool of people that have proper and healthy self-love and self-esteem, which then grants them empathy towards others. Because only the old philosophical adage from this school is to tell you, hey, guess what? You're not even capable of loving another or having empathy or compassion for another until you first have empathy and love and compassion for oneself. That's another part of the equation missed by the Illuminists. Best arguments against, hold on a sec. I don't know why this thing does that. It blocks for a second on my end here. Just give me 1 second. There we go. Best arguments against equality of outcome. So very quickly, guys, we know it's equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. That is the real debate that separates the whole thing. Equality of outcome, often equated with equity in modern discourse, aims to ensure everyone ends up with similar results regardless of input through measures like quotas, redistribution, or lowered standards. Critics argue this approach is fundamentally flawed and harmful for several reasons. So these are the reasons that you got to, study. Equality of outcome undermines incentive and effort. Forcing equal outcomes removes motivation for hard work and innovation. This is why socialism always fails, as rewards no longer correspond to production or talent. This leads to complacency. Remember what that guy about the psychological warfare was saying? They found in Tavistock with that research that trauma and continued trauma can make you complacent. Yeah, take notes. Reduced productivity and a slide towards mediocrity, destroying markets and purpose. You see a lot of people without purpose, depression, they're all on medication, identity crises, right? It's because they're coming from equality of outcome philosophy. Essentially a path to inefficient systems like communism. In education, not failing underperforming students or enforcing uniform results discourages excellence and impoverishes society by lowering standards. I've seen this in the martial art world, and it's atrocious. Leads to inefficiency and resource waste. Historical examples like the Soviet Union show that prioritizing equity causes economic stagnation, shortages, and misallocation. Despite low income inequality, it resulted in empty shelves, overcrowded housing, and agricultural disasters like the Holodomor famine. And this happened so many times, I can't even count them all. Modern corporate parallels, such as DEI-driven hiring at companies like Google or Wells Fargo or airplanes, have led to talent loss, higher attrition, and poorer performance by favoring representation over competence. Oh, and also the political class is another example of this. Impossible without coercion and violates freedom. So here's what they don't want to tell you. This is the fine print. Achieving equal outcomes requires intrusive state or institutional control, suppressing individual potential and ownership of ideas. For example, in the USSR, inventors received minimal rewards since innovations belonged to the state, burying breakthroughs and causing brain drain. Jordan Peterson argues it's inherently impossible due to natural human differences in ability and choice, making any attempt tyrannical. It promotes mediocrity and false justice. Equity policies like gender quotas in management often result in unfair appointments, driving away skilled workers and harming outcomes. Thomas Sowell contends that assuming equal opportunities lead to equal outcomes ignores real-world variables like culture, geography, and personal decisions, labeling it as a social justice fallacy that fails empirically. It stifles innovation and societal progress by not rewarding excellence. Equality of outcome hinders breakthroughs. The U.S.'s merit-driven patent system issued over 350,000 patents in 2020, fostering tech and medical advances, while equity models like in USSR's led to collapse. Peterson emphasizes that it thieves human potential by ignoring hierarchies of competence necessary for complex societies. And guys, there's even better people to argue for it on a philosophical level that went and wrote whole books on it. And we've made a case very strongly, once again, on the Unslaved podcast about exactly who those people are. And, so there you have it. The two arguments. Are we going for freedom? Do you want to maintain your sovereign mind and body and soul and purpose and goals in this life and in this world? Do you want to be left alone by the crowd and the government as much as possible? Not to say you're going to become some hermit living in the woods, but actually a fully functional, healthy, inspired, motivated, educated person within society. And you imagine you had a society that was largely full of these people because of the influences of the culture. So imagine the education system was influencing this, the universities, the mainstream media, the entertainment media, the music industry, the food industry. Look, what do you think all those poisons in your food are? They're there to dumb you down, keep you complacent, and keep you stupid, like keep you sick so that you can go into the big pharma cult of the medics mill. These people don't believe in true freedom, true humanity, true health, true progress. It's all fake. And so what I wanted to just show you here, and this is again, just some clippings of the research you could do yourself to look and compare and contrast the underlying premise behind all these ideas on both sides. And then look at the history of the experiments that have already been done to prove the case as to which one gives the average person what they truly want and which one gives us slavery, ignorance, insanity, depression, division, war, genocide. Which one? Now, I'm not going to be here to be pie in the sky with you and tell you, oh, if we could only get the good stuff in, we could just fix the world. I hope so. It's a worthy cause. But humanity's rejected this time and time again. And maybe on a bigger cosmic level, we're just not ready for it. We're not ready for the truth, which is okay because there's a higher plan than all of us going on. We're just sort of playing a part here in this limited life cycle. But it's a good aim to strive for, to at the very least take these more positive principles out of these ancient mystery traditions, these ancient theological, philosophical, scientific traditions, and bring the best parts of them into your life. And then you as an individual, whether we live in a totalitarian system or whether we live in a much more free system, you are always free to make up your own mind about it. As long as you grant yourself that power and that permission. Like free will is something you got to activate. That didn't come on the box with the instructions with the human being. Just, go listen to some Krishnamurti for a while or someone like that, or some of these people, and they'll tell you, no, you have the ability to switch that function on. But you got to see through the real illusion, the illusion that exists here that's linked to your fear and trauma. When you address that, then you see the real, at least to the extent that a human being is capable. Because there are some philosophers that argue that it's impossible for us to see the real. But no matter which way you find yourself on that, the hope for it is, no matter how many times the popular mind, the public mind, and these totalitarians or cult leaders have taken the power and dominated a culture, there's always been those few voices within that have rebelled. And what they did was they just kept speaking the truth. Some of them got arrested. Some of them got killed. Some of them got imprisoned. Some of them got disappeared. Some of them got ostracized. But here we are with many of those people being vindicated. And now we can learn from that truth and we can try not to repeat it. And we can warn and teach the young, which is the target of these totalitarians. They want the young. That's why they're in your schools. That's why your kids are all confused and taking medications that you shouldn't be taking, that are derived from like cocaine and stuff like that, okay, made by the medics. You got attention deficit disorder. They got all these things. Multiple pronged attack. The continuation of trauma. But we can turn that around. You can turn that around as an individual. You have that power. Might not be able to turn it around for the whole society. We're damn well going to try. But at the very least, you can save yourself. The playbook for the dark side, I just gave it to you. Gave you a little snippet from the playbook of the light side. The choice is yours. The power is in your hands. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope it helped.